Hello, dear friends. Good morning, New York. Good evening, Tokyo. And good afternoon, whole Europe. I see here so many friends. Welcome to Davos Communications Summit. We've been thinking how to organize this for so many months, and we were pretty sure that we will do it live in Davos, Switzerland, among the beautiful mountains of Alps. Unfortunately, this year, 2021, we will do it again online, but this time with a great, enormous success. 150 people online until now. Thank you very much to all you guys. Thank you very much for the participation and for the honor to be together again. With some of you, we've been maybe 11 years in Davos, always February, March. Our Indian friends, our African friends were freezing, and our Swiss friends were feeling excellent. But all of us, we understood each other in the Davos Congress Center, in Davos Plus, because we are in the business of public communications, all of us. And it's no matter if we do public relations or marketing or branding or social media or graphic design, whatever name it, or event management. We are in the business of communications. We love Davos. I thank very much to the newly elected mayor of Davos, to whom I will give the floor very soon. Mr. Philipp Wilhelm is with us today, and he will speak immediately after me. First of all, thank you very much to all of you for coming and for taking your time to listen to our extremely interesting speakers with amazing topics from many countries, from different points of view, different cultures, different feelings. Secondly, thank you very much to our partners. And our partners is the Launchy Studio in Sofia, Bulgaria, where I'm sitting now. Amazing, hospitable, and professional technicians and people who know their job excellently. Then we have our media partner, PR Newswire, and also Public Relations Today. Thank you very, very much for the support. Those of you, 160 already, welcome, who would like to become members of the World Communications Forum Association, the main organizer of the Davos Communications Summit, can go to the website. It's very easy to be found, just World Communications Forum Association, and can become a member filling the application form. I would like to thank also to my friends from the Global Executive Board, people from all over the world, male and women, in public relations and in marketing, university professors, practitioners, 11 people from the Global Executive Board who stayed behind me organizing this and many future events. Thank you very, very much. So today we will have three and a half very interesting hours with our speakers. Three very distinguished main speakers. Barbara Bates from Hotwire, Karen Van Bergen from Omnicom, and Jordan Rittenberry from Edelman. Three main key speakers. And then, of course, we'll have our panels. Power and influence of stakeholders in the new environment. Education, its present and its future. Ethics in post-pandemic communications, such a wonderful topic. I love talking about ethics in all of our meetings in the Congress Center of Davos. And then merge between PR, advertising, and digital. Does it create a new business? Indeed, there is a merge. There is a merge between advertising, public relations, and digital. And it will create a brand new business for sure. Now, I have the honor to invite the mayor of Davos, Philipp Wilhelm, for a welcome speech. Mr. Mayor, you have the floor.
Yeah, dear Mr. President, dear speakers, dear members, dear participants of the World Communications Forum Association, I would like to greet you all very warmly here from sunny and snowy Davos. And first of all, I want to tell you, Mr. President, to thank you that it is a pleasure to host you here in our town midst in the Swiss mountains. And I want to thank you also for organizing forums in our famous Congress Center. I am really looking forward to meeting you in person here in Davos, and I can assure you all, we are using the time when we can't organize any events at the moment. We are using this gap to improve our infrastructure even more. But for now, we know I only can greet you over the screen, and I only can send you my best and warmest regards and greetings on behalf of Davos municipality. I think it's a very important issue you're discussing today. I think in times like these, like times we have at the moment, it is even more essential to talk about how to communicate with the people. It is most important because we cannot afford to lose people's trust, especially in times like that. And so I wish you all a very good summit, a very good and constructive meeting. And of course, I'm really looking forward to meeting you here in Davos in person. I would really like to stay during the meeting, but I have to prepare a very important meeting. We have to talk about the future of Davos culture. One of these things we want to improve even more for the next years. Thank you very much and have a nice summit.
Mr. Mayor, let me tell you, we will come. We promise that we will come. It will be most probably next February or March, if not earlier. Keep for us a very good, big conference room in the Congress Center where the World Economic Forum takes place. I wish you from the bottom of my heart that the World Economic Forum and my good friend Klaus Schwab are coming back to Davos as soon as possible as well. And because you are the brand new mayor of Davos, most probably the newest in Switzerland, let me wish you a best of success to your responsible job, and we'll be happy to have a drink together, to have a beer, to sit in a pub, and also to discuss important issues, how to promote Davos to the whole world as one of the best places which we ever seen in Europe. Thank you very much, and best of luck. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
So let's go to the meeting. My personal advice would be that you set your Zoom software in a way that speaker goes on a big screen. I think something up on the right, when you click view, then you can see different options on the view. If you guys select speaker view, not grid view, then you will be able to see and to hear our distinguished speakers, high-level professionals on a full screen, which is a big advantage. I would like to welcome my good friend, Barbara Bates, an ECO Executive Committee member, and also the CEO of a great agency from the United States, Hotwire. Barbara will speak about leadership in the modern communications. Please, Barbara, mostly welcome.
Thank you, Maxime. It's great to be here. I'm actually speaking to you from California, so it is very, very early in the morning, and I have not yet had my first cup of coffee. So
thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate it.
Sure. I'm going to share my screen so I can get my presentation up here. All good?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, very good.
Okay, great. So I probably have to explain what I mean when I say the genie is out of the bottle, finally. What I mean by that is a very big aha moment has happened for many, many companies, many agencies in the last year, and that is that employees can actually be very successful and very productive working from home, working remotely, working in very different work environments and under very different conditions. So for many years, I know leaders have sort of wanted to keep the genie in the bottle and keep control of their employees and staff, what we call butts in seats, people sitting at their desk. Was very comforting to a lot of people who owned agencies or ran businesses and ran agencies. And they were fearful of, quite honestly, treating their employees like adults and giving them autonomy to do work the way that they wanted to do it. And I think, obviously, this past year has forced businesses to think differently. And I think there's been a lot of learnings that have happened. I personally feel like there was a lot of problems caused by the old approach of how you managed your workforce, with thinking that time was really the critical measurement of someone doing a good job, of everybody working, being forced to work in the same way. And some of the issues, I think, were things like presenteeism. I talked about this butts in seats. Oftentimes people who were the last ones in the office were the ones who were considered to be the best employees and performing best. And that's not always the case. Having a culture where you're having to sit go to where the jobs are, oftentimes is unfair advantage to people from privileged backgrounds who can afford to live in metropolitan areas and so forth. Clearly, we're all suffering from a talent shortage, and being able to open up your recruiting or your talent pool that's not locked by geography. Obviously, burnout was a very big issue, and there was a very, very staid model on what success actually meant, or how it was measured, and that was by promotions. And today, I think we realize that the work-life integration for many is incredibly important, and success might mean that they've been able to create a very strong blended life. Let's see. Okay, so that was the old world. Along came 2020 and this thing called coronavirus, and the world changed forever. And all of a sudden, businesses were having to try to figure out how do they keep businesses working. I know I actually run a global organization, and many parts of the world that we operate in literally came to a standstill until companies figured out that work needed to go on, and they were going to have to figure out how to do that with their employees. The reality was there was a lot of struggling and a lot of muddling for three main reasons. One is they weren't ready with the technology. They weren't digital enough in their operations, and it caused a problem that people working everywhere couldn't have access to the right information, didn't have the right mobile technology, and so forth. There was outdated working practices, meaning people were used to going into the office every day, everything was done in person. But more importantly, because of that, companies, I think, have gotten lax in really setting out clear objectives and goals for their staffs, and really putting a system in place, a framework in place that not only provides autonomy, but also accountability. And then thirdly, I'm sure this is a topic that you all have been talking about, which is many companies were not prepared to take on the pastoral care that was required during this time frame. Mental wellness has been a top priority for many companies, and all of a sudden they were needing to play a role that they had never played before. So the vaccine is coming out. Everything's going to be fine. It's all going to go back to the way it was before, right? Wrong. I think the expectations for employees, for staff, have changed forever. And I do believe that there are many things that will actually never go back to the same. And I think that the expectations of employees to be able to work where they want, to have this attitude that work is what you do, not where you go, that they will be able to have a bigger variety of places that they can live. They don't necessarily need to live in the metro centers where oftentimes the physical buildings of their agencies were located. That because of this need to integrate work and life, meaning parents with school-aged children, people taking care of their aging parents, lots of responsibilities in life, means that there needs to be better integration. I personally don't like the phrase work-life balance because it's never balanced, but building cultures and work expectations where there is a lot more freedom to integrate work and life is really what the expectations for employees are going to be going forward. The future is going to force us to make decisions. We can fight this movement and really try to push things, as I say, put the genie back in the bottle and have build our organizations to go back to the way that it was with old models and old expectations. We can ignore it, assuming that we don't need to make changes and we can just pretend like, letting things go on the way that they are. Or I believe progressive leaders really can embrace this change and actually make it a benefit for their business. Personally, I think if you fight it, you're not going to be around long. If you ignore it, you're still not going to be around long. Maybe take longer to see the negative effects. But I fully believe that by embracing the fact that things are going to have changed, and that modern leaders of communications firms can build a very healthy and prosperous future for their business. One of the reasons why Hotwire was quite so successful in this last year is because we had already moved to this type of model about 8 years ago when I ran my own business, my own agency before it was acquired by Hotwire. And we developed a working philosophy called thoughtful working. And there were a couple, the idea behind thoughtful working is you treat your employees like adults, you give them a lot of autonomy to do the work, to work the best way that they can, to be most productive and to perform the best. And that means not requiring them to come into the office every day. They can work from the client's place, they can work from home. They can, as long as they meet deadlines and get their work done, they can dictate what hours that they work. There are a couple of key things. Thoughtful working is not a flexible or work from home program. It's way more than that. It's really about the culture that you're building with your organization to allow your teams to do the best work that they can. And it's not always the same model because people work very differently. People, more and more are trying to bring diversity into our workplaces. And that means there are different ways of working for many different people. A couple of key ground rules for thoughtful working is we actually don't require anyone to do anything that they believe is a waste of time or the waste of our company or our client's time. And oftentimes that means not attending meetings that seem frivolous or not necessary. We give them the freedom to do work how we want as long as the teams are delivering and meeting their results. And then it's really a lot of responsibility on individuals to know what it means to be successful in their job. So obviously there's communication is key to these types of environments. You need to be in touch with your teams and your managers. There's very clear goals. You know exactly what's being expected of you. You do need to have a better sense of technology. And this is one thing, coming from Silicon Valley and being a technology-focused agency, we had already invested quite a bit in technology. We had been using Zoom for many years, Slack for many years. All of our files were in cloud-based environments, so they could be accessed anywhere. So the transition back last March was very easy for us because we had already sort of made sure that we were digital and our technology was agile enough to support our teams. a key part of this is non-traditional working patterns. You might be someone who gets up really early in the morning and gets a lot of work done from 6 to noon, but then you hit a wall or need to be out in the sunshine during the winter time or whatever that is. Just as long as you are meeting your goals and your responsibilities, you should be able to dictate the way that you get your work done. Full accountability and transparency are key to these types of environments. And like I said, communication is really, really important for everybody. I believe that as industry leaders, we have combined responsibilities to embrace this change and to foster this change, to set a roadmap and really look at what needs to change to put improvement into our working styles. I think, I don't know if this is a global thing or if this is something that is just always acknowledged in the United States, which is being in public relations is one of the most stressful jobs in the world. It always makes the top 10 list. And I think there's a number of reasons for that. You add on top of that the stress from what we've just been going through the last 12 months. And you can see why trying to improve the work environment is really a top priority. It's important to bring everybody along on this journey so they understand why you're doing it. And you're going to run into roadblocks and wrinkles along the way, but if you deal with them timely, I think you'll be much more successful. And then above all, as you're going through these, decisions on how life resumes after the pandemic, to continue to treat your teams with compassion and care, because they've gone through a lot and they will be continuing to go through a lot. If I net it out to what I think the three big areas to focus on in terms of building this modern work culture, I would break it down into these three things. Tech empowerment. As I mentioned, our tech stack was designed to enable people to work productively and seamlessly. And even if people start going back into the offices, most regions will have at least a hybrid working environment. And so you are going to need to make sure that you've got the right technology to support collaboration and communications and those types of things that are obviously critically important to your business. I firmly believe that something like a thoughtful working policy that enables people to work wherever and whenever they want, as long as they're producing their best results. And then the third area is something we at Hotwire called bring your whole self to work. And this is a pretty complicated area because it includes everything from understanding the impact that mental wellness has on your staff and the business. It also has a lot to do with embracing diversity and building an environment where people from lots of different backgrounds can be successful. And oftentimes that means that people can bring their whole self to work, their cultural differences, their racial differences, their sexual differences, all of those things. If they can show up as themselves to work, then they can be a lot more successful. So I think we're going to have a turning point here pretty soon when people start seeing light at the end of the tunnel, and we will be starting to get back to maybe not normal, but there'll be a little bit of an opportunity to maybe start doing some of the things that we did prior to the pandemic. And I just encourage everyone to really think about taking this opportunity to not go back to the old ways, to embrace some of the opportunities that we have that were forced upon us with the pandemic, and use that as a way to create a very healthy and progressive working environment for your staff.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Barbara. Such an insightful speech. We will leave the questions afterwards. And please stay with us. 2 more short presentations by the rest of our 2 keynote speakers. Karen, did you fix your microphone, speakers, everything?
We did, Maxim. Thank you for asking.
Karen, I just want to remind you, 2014 Paris Eco Summit. if you remember, you were a keynote speaker. I was a moderator. Just the same role 7 years ago. You were talking about all of us going home to work in the public relations business because it's much more convenient. And I was supporting you 7 years ago. Now our dream came true. We all stay home. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I will say that Barbara's presentation really hit home. I cannot agree more, and I loved her call to action. So I'm glad we set that scene 7 years ago.
So, Karen Van Bergen is the next speaker, keynote speaker. She's a global dean of Omnicom University in the United States, and her topic is leadership and learning. I like learning so much, a continuous journey. Karen.
Thank you, Maxim. Thanks for having me, and thanks, Barbara, for that great call to action. I'm delighted to be here with you today and talk about my passions, leadership and learning. I'd like to start with a few words on Omnicom University, as it sets the scene for my talk. Omnicom, as you know, one of the world's largest marketing and communications services holding companies, makes an unparalleled investment in developing its talented senior employees into leaders. Omnicom University was created 26 years ago, and it's a suite of management and leadership development programs. About 600 senior executives per year go through the programs. They come from all over the world, from all different types of agencies, meeting live for anywhere between 4 and 7 days. The content is tailored to our business of marketing and communication services. Half of the cases discussed in class are real-life Omnicom agency experiences, selected and written by my team. The cases are taught by top Harvard Business School professors. Our students are encouraged to look at leadership challenges from different angles and debate possible solutions. Attending Omnicom University is for virtually every student a life-changing experience. Not only do you learn about the changes in our industry, leadership characteristics and your challenges, but you learn an awful lot about yourself. You learn about your current skills, where and how you can expand, and how to embrace continuous learning. You learn how to make better decisions that place talent at the center. Daunting, yet appealing for this level of leaders. And on top of the amazing content, you get to know your peers really well. In many cases, people form long-lasting relationships, which obviously fosters critically important interagency client collaboration. So why do we invest so deeply in growing our leaders? Because we firmly believe that when we invest in our senior talent, and we also invest in our junior talent, but that's a different topic, they will take lessons learned to their teams. They will inspire and encourage their employees, who in turn will take great care of our clients, and hence business will grow. This is called the service profit chain. It's a theory developed by 3 Harvard Business School professors, 2 of whom are professors at Omnicom University. And summarizing, it says that employee satisfaction leads to client satisfaction and loyalty, which leads to revenue and profit growth. So let's talk about what makes a leader. Quite often you'll hear, she or he is a born leader. And while it is true that some congenital traits can be helpful in developing leadership skills, it's even more true that leaders are made. Leadership skills are acquired through continuous learning and experience. And what are leadership skills? And there are so many different definitions, but for me, these 5 ones are key. The first one is the ability to create a compelling vision and motivate people to come on board. The second one is to have high emotional intelligence, empathy, honesty, respect, supportiveness, and hopefully humility. The third one is one very close to this audience's heart, great communication skills. Communicate honestly, relentlessly, and above all, being able to truly listen and encourage input. The fourth one is resilience. The Harvard Business Review defines resilience as The ability to recover from setbacks, adapt well to change, and keep going in the face of adversity. Essentially, it's your ability to keep calm and carry on in the face of any stuff life throws at you, which will arm you with self-discipline, courage, positivity, and decisiveness. And the last, the fifth point, but certainly not the least, is endless curiosity, which leads to learning agility, creative thinking, cultural adaptability, and results in an innovative mindset. And all the above skills can be acquired. Recognition of resilience as a leadership skill is relatively new, but research has made it abundantly clear that's crucial to arm leaders with resilience training. And by the way, teaching leaders about building resilience starts with taking great care of themselves first. As they say on the plane when we were still flying around the world, put on your mask first before helping others. At Omnicom University, we started teaching resilience quite a few years ago. For those of you who are interested in learning more, I highly recommend following the Impact Human Performance organization, led by our former communications colleague turned coach, Nick Proper. There's a reason why I chose the 5 leadership skills I just listed. I firmly believe that these are the skills that will be the hallmarks of future leaders. We've all heard the term VUCA more often than we like, I guess. VUCA, or volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, is how we describe our current and future landscape. Or in simple terms, the only constant is change. Handling constant change will demand leaders who are good listeners, are comfortable in showing their human side, are resilient, and are able to take decisions fast, yet informed. They will continuously learn from their experience and share these learnings with their teams, so that their teams stay motivated and understand that they can accomplish great things together. So let's turn to leadership in challenging times. This enduring crisis, the pandemic and its devastating economic impact, has asked even more from leaders than before. Coupled with political extremism and racial injustice being laid bare once again, navigating your people through the last year has been beyond challenging. The need for resilient leaders has never been more urgent. And what have we learned from these times? That it is even more important to display your human self as a leader. Show empathy and interest in each individual employee, and Barbara referred to that as well. As a leader, you should communicate often, honestly, and with realistic optimism. You're a lifeline for everyone. Realistic optimism, by the way, is that you're honest about the crisis in all its brutal aspects. However, you remain positive and you emphasize that this agony will end, even if we don't know exactly when. And that we're in it together and we will come out of this stronger. I would like to draw attention to the amazing work Harvard Business School and Omnicom University professor Nancy Kane has done on lessons learned from courageous leaders through history. I highly recommend her book, Forged in Crisis: The Power of Courageous Leadership. If you think you are having a bad time, nothing better than to read about the hardship of Abraham Lincoln, Frederick Douglass, or Ernest Shackleton. The leaders Professor Kane describes are all about deeply caring for their people, showing vision and motivating their people to pull through, and who in the darkest of times have that resilience to remain strong and positive and show light at the end of the tunnel. And then on top of all hardship and challenges, we've all had to shift gears to practice leadership online. No opportunities for close personal connections, to experience culture in different countries, to read body language in meetings, or create those important bonds with new colleagues. Instead, we've had to revert to what seems endless online meetings, leading to a new term, Zoom fatigue. I hope you've all experienced what to do at those meetings and what not. In these virtual meetings, it's even more important for leaders to show interest in every single participant and ask each of them about what's going on in their direct world. It's crucial to consider cultural considerations from different time zones to meeting styles, making doubly sure that everyone has an opportunity to speak up and recognizing each person doing so. Being inclusive and encouraging and create a safe zone for all. In our virtual world, more than ever, is a strong commitment to communications the key to keeping people connected. At Omnicom University, we decided early on not to transform all our live programs into all virtual, as the being together in person is a huge part of the success. However, we have provided monthly leadership webinars taught by our professors, which we've been offering to a wide audience of agency leadership teams. The webinars have focused on leadership during and after the crisis, how to navigate the new normal, if there is such a thing, and how to build resilience. We've heard back from our hundreds of participants that these webinars have been a true lifeline and provided the refueling and motivation many of them needed. So what does this all mean for leadership in our industry? The marketing and communications industry is, in my opinion, at the forefront of change is the new normal. I don't have to tell you all how mind-blowing the pace is with which platforms, channels, audience reach, information distribution, and consumption constantly are changing. At Omnicom University, we spend a substantial part of our classes discussing the challenges posed by new technology platforms, making sense of data and insights, smartly connecting different sources, and different models for interagency collaboration. Our leaders across each level of the organization need to have the leadership skills of the future in spades. And they need to get comfortable with never arriving at an endpoint, but embracing a continuous learning mode. That's not a nice to have, it's a key component of an organization's success. A Deloitte study has found that companies with a learning culture are 46% more likely to be first to market, have 37% higher productivity, and are 92% more likely to innovate. I've mentioned a few times the importance of continuous learning. How can we create a continuous learning environment as an organization? And how can we develop that personal dedication to always be learning? Obviously, our organization must offer access to ongoing learning opportunities for current and future leaders. There are so many live and virtual options to put together a wide range of curriculums and allow individuals to determine when and what they want to dive into. But how do we inspire individuals to aspire to be continuous learners? Another hero professor of mine, Carol Dweck, professor in psychology at Stanford, has developed this compelling theory about growth mindset versus fixed mindset. In short, a fixed mindset believes that success is based on innate ability, and no amount of learning can close the gap to become the best. A growth mindset, on the contrary, believes that most basic abilities can be developed through dedication and hard work, and that this creates a love of learning and resilience, which are essential for great accomplishments. As Professor Dweck says, in one world, effort is a bad thing. It, like failure, means that you're not smart or talented. If you were, you wouldn't need effort. In the other world, effort is what makes you smart or talented. While the basis of fixed versus growth mindset starts in early childhood, and Professor Dweck has some awesome and terrifying examples, as leaders, we can still create an environment that encourages growth mindset. We can and must create a safe environment that encourages reflection, sets clear goals, taking on challenges, replacing failure with learning, and appreciating the journey rather than the end goal. And most of all, as leaders, walking the talk, leading by example. So let me finish with some takeaways. The first one is leadership skills are acquired. The second, put your people first, mid, and last. Thirdly, embrace change as the new normal. 4, invest in continuous learning. And 5, embrace a growth mindset. And finally, I would like to share one of my favorite leadership quotes from John Quincy Adams. If your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, you are a leader. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. A true leader speech and motivating speech. I've received so many feedbacks on WhatsApp, on Viber, here on the chat of Zoom. Thank you very much indeed. And next keynote speaker, coming from maybe Johannesburg, but I think he's based now in Nigeria or speaking from Nigeria. If you ever heard about Edelman Trust Barometer 2021, this is one of the most significant documents, analytical documents on the public relations and communications markets these days. So I would like to invite our good friend, Jordan Rittenberry, who is the CEO of Edelman Africa, to present the barometer. Jordan, you have the floor, wherever you are.
Great. No, and thanks so much. And yes, based in Johannesburg, but you're correct. Coming to you from Lagos, Nigeria today, as we get close to finalizing an acquisition and continue expanding our presence on the continent. And I hope you can all see my screen now as we kick off. But look, we've been, thank you, Sally. Edelman has been studying trust for 21 years now, and in many ways, we thought last year's trust report was the most significant piece of work we had done. And that was true, but it was only to date, because in many ways, what we're seeing and the dramatic changes over the last year bring a lot of key and fundamental issues to the forefront of our 2021 survey. And let me kick it off with a little bit about our research methodology. So we've been studying trust for 21 years now. It's an online study conducted in 28 countries, 33,000 respondents globally. It's a very significant, sizable piece of data. The field work, or the actual survey, was put out from October 19 to November 18, 2020. And of course, the US election occurred during this time on November 3rd. So we actually recast our US survey in mid-December because we would have seen many, many dramatic changes. In every single market, we look at 1,150 respondents, but we also break out the audiences. And I want to show you a couple examples in the presentation. We break it out between the informed public and the mass population. And the informed public are those ages 25 to 64. They're university educated. They're in the top 25% of household income, and they report themselves to be significant consumers of media. And then the mass population is everyone else. So it'll be important a couple times to look at the stark contrast here. Look, and over 21 years of studying trust, it's been very, very interesting to see a lot of different trends emerge. In 2005, we saw trust shift from authorities to peers. In 2006, we saw a person like me becomes a credible spokesperson. Interestingly enough, Facebook was launched in 2004. Additionally, following the global financial crisis, we saw trust in business in 2009 really, really plummet. And then in 2012, trust in government did the same thing. More recently, we've seen a battle for truth. We've seen fake news, really pitting or really making dramatic changes in levels of trust across media. And then this year, we do look at the pandemic's ongoing impact on trust, because I assure you, it has been dramatic. And while COVID-19 has really been the dramatic umbrella of the entire year, there was actually a lot that was happening along the way as well. So it's easy to lose sight of those other markers as well. We saw Black Lives Matter being a very powerful movement globally. We see a lot of markets continuing to struggle with things like gender-based violence. Of course, the US election that I mentioned earlier and Brexit, all of these things continue to create, really a perfect storm when it comes to trust. So some of the good news, when we look at trust, we did see trust rise across 3 of our 4 institutions. And when we look at trust, we look at trust in business, NGOs, government, and media. And while it looks great that this trust is rising, it really, we believe, is a bit of a bubble. Due to COVID, we conducted supplemental research in the middle of last year, and we saw trust in government was actually up 12 points overall. But since 2012, we've seen 10 double-digit increases in trust, but almost every single time they come right back down within a year. So we still think some of these levels are a bit inflated due to COVID and will likely come back down. But this is one of the times where we see, the best out of governments, really in times of crisis that we were talking about earlier, as well as business. But now business is the only trusted institution globally at 61 points, while NGOs, government, and media remain in what we're calling our neutral category. But overall, we saw trust increasing 2 points, coming up with an index, which is our average level of trust across the 4 institutions, a trust index of 56. And now when we look at that globally, it's interesting to see the changes from 2020 to 2021. And this is the global, this is the index across each of the countries that we surveyed. And really what we see is fairly typical. About a third of the countries we look at fall into our category of trust, a third into a sort of middle ground of neutrality, and then a third have levels of distrust. Interestingly, over the last year, we saw a record year-over-year decline in trust in China, while they're still in the trusted category, dropping 10 points, Australia gaining 10 points, and we did see a lot of Western markets increase levels of trust. And we believe this is largely due to their ability and their response to the pandemic. As you can see here, we have the informed public on the left and the mass population on the right. And this is where it gets concerning. When we look at the informed public on the left, it looks like about 2/3 of our countries that we survey fall into levels of trust with very little in neutrality. But when we look at the mass population, it looks like about half of the countries that we survey fall into areas of distrust. So what this tells us is your level of income and your level of education have an impact on how you trust the 4 institutions. We're also seeing a record gap of 16 points overall between the informed public and the mass population, with many, many countries that we look at having trust gaps or a gap between the informed public and the mass population in the high teens or even the 20s, very, very high. And this does cause concern. I'm based here in Nigeria at the moment for a few weeks, but Nigeria actually has one of the smallest trust gaps at 3 points, and Kenya's at 7, interestingly. And not surprisingly, the pandemic has continued to fuel societal fears. And what we see is 84% of the population is worried about job loss, and they're either worried or fearful, 84%, whereas 65% of the population is worried about contracting COVID. So what this tells us is people are willing to risk their lives and their health in order to put food on the table globally. Additionally, 56% of the population has seen a portion of their own workforce have their hours reduced or jobs eliminated. So many of the individuals around the world are living in fear, wondering if they're going to be next, if they're going to also have their work and hours cut. Also, not surprisingly, the pandemic is widening inequalities around the world. 62% of the population has said that those with less education, less money, and fewer resources are being unfairly burdened. And we also see a lot of our emerging markets on the far left. So they have a much higher feeling or agreement with that statement that those are being unfairly burdened who have less money and fewer resources. Additionally, vaccine hesitancy remains a hurdle. Only 64% of the population is willing to take the vaccine now or within the next year. That's far below the 70% that's required for herd immunity. This really will be challenging if we find that individuals are not willing or are afraid of getting the vaccine. And while we are facing a pandemic, obviously, what we're also seeing is an infodemic that's feeding mistrust. People don't know who to trust, what organizations to trust. They really don't know where they can turn to for trusted information. Trust in all media sources really are reaching record lows. And we saw trust across search engines, traditional media, owned media, and social media all dropping. And the change from 2020 to 2021, 6 points, 8 points, so fairly high. It's worth noting that search engines and traditional media in 2021 are in the level of neutrality. So they're not distrusted, but they're not automatically trusted. And owned media and social media, really continuing to hit record lows. globally and in almost every market we look at, search engines are the most trusted source of information. And now, of course, this doesn't mean that we can't rely on media sources or that consumers won't believe anything that we say. It simply means that we need to continue to leverage the full spectrum of media outlets and channels so that individuals are seeing information multiple times. Our research also indicates that people need to see this information 6 to 8 times before they really, truly trust it. Additionally, media are seen as biased, and journalists specifically, 59% of the population says journalists and reporters are purposefully trying to mislead people by saying things they know are false or gross exaggerations. 59% of the population also said that most news organizations are concerned with supporting an ideology, and 61 points saying media is not doing well at being objective or bipartisan. So this is really the root of some of the levels of distrust in media. And we actually see fairly similar stats in a lot of the markets that we look at. These aren't outlying data points, and these are our global averages. Additionally, we also interestingly see in the wake of this infodemic, we are seeing consumers' priority shifts. And because they don't believe they can trust anything or everything that the media puts out, they're really taking matters into their own hand. And they're focusing on, yes, prioritizing family and their own needs. 64% say it's more important this year than last year, but they're also saying it's important to increase my media and information literacy. I need to really understand the sources and the outlets where this news is coming from. 52% says they're increasing their science literacy. I don't think many of us knew about much about viruses before the last year or so, but we see individuals going out and really studying and reading up. Additionally, 51% says it's more important to be politically aware so they can really make heads or tails of what's going on around them. And given all of this data and people aren't sure where they can trust information, it's also putting leadership in question, frankly. 57% of the population says that government leaders are purposefully trying to mislead people by saying things they know are false. And 56% say business leaders are purposely trying to mislead people. This is more than half of the population, guys. And I think this makes it highly concerning for consumers when they don't know whether they can trust the government leaders or the business. Really, it's where can they turn to? And what we're finding is trust in my employer, in the individual in the individual organization that you work for, is increasing dramatically, and it's increased every year for the last 5 years that we've been looking at my employer as a regards to trust indicator. We see trust in my employer globally is at 76%, whereas trust in business is at 61% as the most trusted institution. So a 15-point gain and almost a 25-point gain from government and media. And the reason for this is consumers or your employer is something that's close and personal to you. So consumers know why their organization or why their employer is making specific changes. They know the management team. They read the news about the employer. They know their colleagues and the people they work with. They can share information. So they're bringing trust really close to the center and making it something that's quite personal to them. Additionally, employee expectations are shifting. 59%, of course, say it's more important for employers to keep workers and customers safe, but they're still worried about job training programs and job skills and not being replaced by AI. But what's also interesting, 54% of the population as well says regular employee communications are more important this year than last year. Consumers and individuals want to be communicated to from their employers, so we cannot overlook employee communications or internal communications in the pandemic. We know employees are getting a lot of messages, but when they trust employers to such a high degree, it's our responsibility to ensure we're talking to them and putting out truthful information that they can trust. And additionally, as we've seen, there is a new mandate for business as the most trusted institution, and some of our other data that I haven't put into this due to time looks at business and says business is the only institution that's both competent and ethical. NGOs are viewed as ethical but not competent, and media and business are viewed as not competent and not ethical. So business really is a pillar and a beacon for hope. 68% of the population says business has to step in, and CEOs specifically, when the government doesn't fix societal problems. 66% say CEOs should it, and 65% say CEOs should hold themselves accountable to the public and not just the board or stockholders. So we're seeing stockholder trust, or we're seeing a shift from stockholders to shareholders. And it's really interesting, and not company shares or stakeholders rather. But it's really interesting to see individuals expecting CEOs step up and take the lead. And this 86% of the population says CEOs should publicly speak out about societal challenges. We have seen this quite a bit over the last year, but it's becoming increasingly important. It's absolutely paramount for executives to be out on the forefoot, talking about what's going on in the world today. We can't simply turn a blind eye and not address things. So if we're doing communications internally, or if we're running executive visibility programs, we have to leverage this data, and we have to show CEOs that you have to have a point of view on what's taking place in the world around us. Consumers expect that, and it increases trust. So really quickly, recap. It's great to have all this data, and it's super interesting, but how do we put it into practice? And that's the point of this. It's to take this data and leverage it as a roadmap, or reverse engineer it so that we can build trust in companies, because we know time and time again that when a company is trusted, people buy their goods and services, they pay more for them, they tell their friends and family about them, they post their opinions online. We've also seen it drives employee retention, it drives shareholder value. So we have to take this data and do something with it in order to increase levels of trust. First and foremost, business has to embrace their expanded mandate. CEOs have to speak out and address societal inequalities and social issues. We have also been saying, act first, talk later. We're calling it action communications, but we believe business has to take action and then talk about it, rather than simply talking about all of the things that they're going to do. Consumers are very skeptical now. We also should harness employer trust. Business has to continue to bring employees close and empower them to carry the brand forward. We need to communicate with them early and often. Third, as businesses, we have to provide trustworthy content. We have to become publishers and create truthful, unbiased, reliable information. And we have to leverage all of the media channels available to us. While we do see varying levels of trust and distrust when it comes to media sources, we have to use all of them. We have to continue to communicate with employers, or with individuals. And fourth, don't go it alone. While business does have an overwhelming lead when it comes to trust across all the categories, business has to partner with the government, with NGOs and media to find a common purpose. We've seen when we partner together, it's increasingly founding levels of trust. And also it's important to give customers and employees a seat at the table. And I'm more than happy to share some of this data. I know I went through it fairly quickly, but feel free to drop me a line, and I'd be more than happy to send it around to anyone or even have separate conversations. But thank you for the opportunity to present this. Again, Barbara and Karen, two very good acts to follow. And Barbara, I really hope you've had that cup of coffee.
Thank you very much, Jordan. Thank you, really appreciate. A lot of questions here in the chat. Do you want that I read them, or you just take them from the chat? And by the way, all of you, dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, you have the floor to put questions. We had excellent 3 speakers: Barbara Bates, Karen Van Bergen, and Jordan Rittenberry. So the topics of 3 of them were a little bit different, but they were aimed mainly on leadership, pandemic, and what do we do these days and in the future. So please ask them questions both in the chat and also with a voice. Mostly welcome. If there is a question,
Maxim, if I can.
Yes, please.
We've seen that there is a big mistrust for many souls.
Please introduce yourself. Is it Cesare Valli?
Cesare Valli from Italy.
Okay, I recognize you by the voice, but please, when you ask questions, introduce yourself. Cesare Valli, Italy.
I thought you saw me. Yeah. So my question is, we've seen in this very interesting presentation the mistrust about media. And this is clearly a consequences of what we've seen, fake news, behavior of the leading people, and so on and so forth. This, I believe, is a key question for our business, because the more the media will lose trust, the more difficult will be for us to communicate. I would like to have a feedback on this topic from Jordan, because I think it is fundamentally important for all our business to understand how important it is to convey truth communication based on fact and not just comments on, as we see so too many times. Thank you.
Thank you, Cesare.
No, you're absolutely right. And I'll just quickly answer. Look, I think media needs to focus on keeping the editorial pieces in the editorial, and the content they put out has to be unbiased, unopinionated, has to be well researched. They still, can get trust back. It hasn't fully left them, but they have to really continue to show up, consistently do their part. And again, well-researched, unbiased, unopinionated pieces are absolutely going to be critical. I think it would also be interesting to look at, some of the way Trump was viewed by media as opposed to the way Obama, as opposed to the way Biden. It'd be interesting to do some research on that to see where we're seeing opinions come up and down, because we know what media outlets in the U.S. specifically lean which way. But I agree. I think media or individuals just don't believe that the media are unbiased. They believe they have an agenda and they're trying to make their points made.
Thank you. Thank you, Jordan. Any other questions?
John Hunt, if I may, Maxim. So,
John Hans from Portugal. Please, John Hans, our Vice President.
Jordan, thank you very much for a really inspiring presentation. Allow me just to ask, what is our individual role and responsibility in building that trust? Because it is so easy to say journalists and them and those, but what about the element of each one of us straightening our back and taking responsibility to create a new environment in which each and everyone can actively contribute? Thank you.
And that's a really great question. I would say, as all of us are communicators and within the industry, within the space, we have just as much of a responsibility as the journalists do to ensure that the content we're putting out is truthful, is factual. It's a job we have to continuously do over time, rather than skewing stories in a particular way or showing one side of a particular issue. We really need to focus on quality of information, well-researched content that's well documented, using multiple media, using multiple sources in order to validate particular points. We've seen that there's different levels of trust with named sources and unnamed sources, actually dramatic different levels of trust. So consumers need to get those reassurances all along the way. And I also think, again, we need to leverage all of the different types of media, earned, owned, and paid, as communicators in order to get our message across, because there are low levels of trust. So we need to continue to enable consumers and individuals to see messages across platforms.
I have a question.
Thank you. One more question, please.
Yes. Hi, Jordan. Thank you. Awesome presentation.
Solly Moing from Cape Town, another one of our vice presidents. Hi, Solly.
Thank you, Maxim. Question is this, we, and you did it in your presentation, Jordan, we have a tendency of saying the media, as if the media is one homogeneous blood, and it really has the media. The media is as diverse as other communities. In the PR, strategic communications, marketing communities, there are many people. There are good ones and bad ones. There are people who spin, like that agency in the UK that failed in South Africa. What do they call them again? They don't exist anymore. So point I'm making is, how do we get people to understand that media is not one homogeneous blood? It's many. There are good people in the media who are very strict about the rules and the traditions of verifying information, making sure that you don't put stuff out there without making sure that you're not being abused by the sources who might have other motives. And there are people who just take stuff because they have to meet deadlines. So media is not one thing. The key is, how do we get people to understand that there's no such thing as one media? Media is good or media is bad.
I have a question.
Yep. Yeah, let me answer this question. I'll come right to you, or Maxim will. Look, and I think as we look at this survey, we look broadly at the institutions, and we call it the media broadly and somewhat purposefully, so that we can really evaluate that, because we're a communications agency, right? But additionally, when we look at it, we do look at different sources of media, as you saw on the one slide, search, traditional, social, owned media. We also have more content that really unpacks the different levels of media. And we go to paid advertising, sponsored content, company websites, et cetera, to really give us a broad sense and a broad spectrum of where there's different levels of trust. And it's quite interesting to see that type of breakout when consumers really do look at media as different types, because we think media as a whole is fairly distrusted. But when we see journalist written articles that name sources, we see very high levels of trust, right? Journalist articles or journalist written articles that don't name sources, very low levels of trust, social low levels of trust. Company websites are actually one of the most trusted sources of information. So it's really interesting to unpack it, Sally, and really look at the different variations and the different levels.
Okay, thank you.
Much. I think we're a little bit ahead of time. It's something like 6-7 minutes, which never been in my life before in Davos. Usually we are running something like 45 minutes to 1 hour ahead, and always we are late, but thank you very much. Thank you, really, Stephanie Sleason. You know, I had two choices, in fact. One of them was to organize a webinar. And in the during the webinar, you all would stay silently and anonymously, and just the speakers will be able to appear. The other one, which was a little bit more risky one, was to make a meeting, a real meeting like we had in Davos, like we had in Geneva, in many other places. By the way, World Communications Forum organized a couple of regional, no, 10s even, not couple of regional events. Istanbul, Moscow, Prague, Jakarta, Kuala Lumpur, many other places. We've been there, of course, Johannesburg. So I really thank you that you stay silent, that you listen carefully. And now my role is about to finish because our panel discussion starts. We have the first panel, Power and Influence of Stakeholders in the New Environment. By the way, the topic was suggested by my good friend Solly Moing from Cape Town, one of our vice presidents. And then we decided the moderator will be his good friend and my good friend, Victor Sibeko, the former president of the Public Relations Institute of South Africa, PRISA. I've been there speaking, great guys, great professionals. And Victor will be the moderator with the participation of Janina Dubajkowska, who I think will be substituted by someone else today. And Saurabh Uboveya, our board member of the association from India, Solly, the famous Solly, and Leslie Schroeder-McLean from Chile. There are some people I never met before, and Leslie is one of them, but soon it will come to Davos. So, Victor Sibeko, are you ready to take over?
I'm very well, thank you, and ready to take over. What a brilliant afternoon we're having. Greetings from South Africa.
Kosi Sikelele Africa.
Amanda.
Amanda Langoveto.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, fellow practitioners joining us from all over the world, a very special warm greetings from South Africa. This is a very special event we're attending, and we're very delighted to be part of this. As introduced, my name is Victor Sibeko. I'll be the moderating this session. Very interesting topic, power and influence of stakeholders in the new environment. Please allow me to open up with this quote. It is easier to influence strong than weak character in life. We cannot influence people we refuse to associate with. Influence is when we are not the one talking and yet our words fill the room. When we are absent and yet when we are present, our presence is felt. This is only possible when we know who our stakeholders are and not only know who they are, but understand how to deal with them under all circumstances. Ladies and gentlemen, this afternoon we're talking about the power and influence of stakeholders in the new environment. To take us through this topic this afternoon is our well-versed practitioners from various business sectors with varying high expertise in this regard. And forming part of this panelist is Leslie McLean, Surab Uboweja, Soli Mueng, and someone else will be replacing Yanina. Allow me to give the panelists a moment to each introduce themselves and give us a brief overview of what we're talking about today. Leslie.
Hi, Victor. It's lovely to connect with you again, albeit through a screen. I'd much rather be doing this over a cup of coffee with you. But of course, a whole chunk of our world has moved online now, and I think we're all feeling that lack of connection. And I'm loving the seminar today. But it's precisely because of that lack of connection that we have to focus on our stakeholders more than ever before. And in many ways, we're going to have to reinvent our approach because engagement is likely to stay online for the foreseeable future. So I'm going to be kicking off with mapping and the importance of putting employees at the center of engagement.
Right, thank you, Leslie. Just hold it right there. May I ask Surab Obueja, I saw you. Just an opening comment from you, Surab.
Hi everyone, and hello, Victor. A very warm evening in India, afternoon in Africa, and I think it's morning in the United States and the rest of Americas. So yeah, so I think what a wonderful sort of topic that we've got to ponder over tonight. And the way I see it is, the moment I sort of reflected on this, the first thing that struck me was how the COVID pandemic has played an important role in highlighting the growing inequalities. And in spite of the fact that COVID didn't really discriminate between the rich or the poor while infecting them with the virus, it is clearly emerging as the pandemic of inequality, as it leaves an aftermath of shocking disparities across our already fractured ecosystems. And women in particular, but alongside poor, the elderly, the disabled, the minority, and the migrant populations, have actually borne the largest brunt of the fallout. And in that sense, I think it becomes very, very important to see how the power and influence has sort of got increasingly centralized in the hands of a very few stakeholders. And so today I'm going to really talk about that and how that's sort of posing a significant risk to ecosystems where an active participation from a larger number of stakeholders is valued more.
Thank you so much. Let us hear from Soli Mueng, very special brother and a fellow professional from Cape Town, South Africa. Soli, just give us a brief opening and comment.
Thank you. Hello, bonjour, hola, aloha. We're moving from an era where stakeholders were employees, shareholders, and it stopped there, to an era where everybody is a stakeholder. So I think actually we should be talking about direct and indirect stakeholders. So the people who are, anyone who gets influenced directly or indirectly by the activities of your brand is your stakeholder. It could be somebody who's married to somebody who works for you. It could be somebody who's married or with a friend or is dating, or somebody who is in some way connected to your brand. So brand communication has to get from a point where it thinks it's all about maximizing shareholder value to a point where it maximizes stakeholder value, especially the environment. We live in a world, especially post-COVID, we've realized, and I'm very happy that a lot of you mentioned this, we're in a world now where the connectedness of the world is big. It's obvious. Look at us. Look at this community of people sitting in this meeting room, as it were, virtual meeting room. You all over the world: Chile, America, Russia, Bulgaria, Portugal, etc. Point I'm making is that we are a lot more connected than it appears. And when brands communicate, they can't say, in Nigeria, this is what we're going to say. In Bulgaria, this is what we're going to say. In Chennai, India, this is what we're going to say. They have to say, what do people think about us? What is it that we're doing? Or what is the impact of what we're doing and how we do it on our stakeholders? Because my friend in Chennai will tell me, Soli, don't support that brand over there because this is what they're doing in Chennai. They're dumping stuff in our rivers. They are polluting our rivers. We can't even, all these subsistence farmers are being threatened. Their lives are being threatened because they can't make a livelihood. So we have to be very mindful as brands, as brand communicators, as consultants or advisors to brand communications, to say to them, don't think that the world is not watching you. Big Brother is all over the place. Now, my discussion is in the world of Big Brother being all over the place, how do we advise brands to communicate? Thank you.
Right. We're coming back to that one because it's very important to see what is the link between brand communication and stakeholder relationship management. Now, to kick off our discussion, I'm going to go straight to Leslie. Leslie, we know that stakeholders are critical to organization survival, and they need to identify them, analyze them, segment them. It's very important. But be that as it may, what seems to require more than attention is stakeholder mapping. So these days we're facing the new environment, the stakeholder mapping, and most importantly, talking about employees as part of the people that are on that map. What is your take on this?
Thanks, Victor. Well, I think many times words become so cliched because we use them too much. So maybe a quick definition. If we talk about stake, what is a stake? It's normally a wooden post that you drive into the ground to indicate ownership. And in terms of a business, if you have a stake, it will either be a financial stake or the business affects your life directly in some way, or what you do can influence the success or failure of that business. And then if we talk about engagement, we can think of two people who engage, they make a promise to each other, and they have a purpose for that engagement. Now, due to time constraints, I'm not going to go into detail about stakeholder profiling, but it should be a living, evolving thing that helps you to understand your stakeholders better. And in my experience over many years, I've seldom seen this done in a coherent way. And if we look at measurement, again, there's an issue between qualitative and quantitative measurement because it's very time consuming to do qualitative measurement of engagement. And it's also difficult to compare qualitative. So I tend to focus on numbers where you use observational and participation methods. But the starting point, of course, is mapping. And there are a variety of matrices out there. I think the one that many of us are most familiar with is the interest influence matrix, where we normally tend to give a lot of importance to those with high power, while those with high interest but low influence are normally considered less important. And of course, it's very easy to identify who is powerful. And that's why it's so important that we brainstorm prioritization of stakeholders as a team. If you don't do that, you can overlook some. and you can engage too much resource in those who are not really crucial to your long-term success. And you can really distill this down to 4 questions. 1, can you succeed without their money, support, or permission? 2, can you identify exactly what you want from the person? 3, do you want to grow the relationship? And 4, how difficult would it be to replace the person? And you're hearing me speak of person, and I'm doing that deliberately because authentic engagement happens between people. And sometimes we think of a company as a living entity. We speak of company as if it has a personhood. But in fact, even the word corporate communication is a misnomer because companies don't communicate. They can craft careful messages, but they don't communicate. It's people who communicate. And I think that's so important to remember. And it's why I want to highlight that employees are actually at the heart of your engagement, because every day they're having conversations with communities, with suppliers, with customers, with government. And you can kind of visualize this as a giant spider's web where there's a constant weaving together of conversation threads. And yet so little attention is given to this level of stakeholder engagement. And a big part of what we do as a consultancy is to help global companies, help their executives communicate more clearly in multilingual meetings and in emails when they're engaging stakeholders in their second language. But you can't script a phone conversation, and you can't monitor every email. And people will not be brand ambassadors for their company. They won't talk authentically about purpose unless they feel that what they do has value and that they are valued. And this last year, when nothing has been normal, I've had wonderful insight, opportunity to see how clients of mine have really put their employees at the center of their engagement, how they've helped them to navigate the changes and given them practical and emotional support. And the end result of that is that productivity with remote work has been way higher than I think we've ever imagined it could be. And despite the challenges, people have been really resilient, adaptable. And that only happens when people genuinely feel that their work is a long-term engagement, when they feel it has purpose, and when they feel there is an authentic promise between them and management, and both want to honor that promise.
Wow. Thank you so much, Leslie, for that. Well covered. I'm really picking up quite a lot of things that we will talk about later on when we come to second round. But I urge all the delegates, wherever you are, make notes. And if you have any questions, get them ready. When we get towards the end of the panel, we'll get back to you. Now, coming to Surab, looking at how stakeholders has earned its place in governance, according to good code of corporate governance, where organizations are expected to know who the stakeholders are. And you know the process and the drill. You find them, you identify them, you analyze them, you segment them, then you map them. But what seems to be happening is that power and influence is increasingly residing in the hands of the few. Talk to us about that and your understanding of this particular concern, the power and influence. Over to you, Surab.
Yeah. Thanks, Victor, for actually putting that out. And I was listening to Leslie and how that could really relate to the idea of, while on one side you've got people in an organization or employees who are sort of in a very, very unique situation, and especially during the pandemic, where they kind of lost their power as influencers of a culture, or as influencers of their abilities and their talent, that sort of got them into very strong situations. And suddenly the leaders in these organizations, and when I say leaders, it's actually across the board. It could be organizations, small businesses, medium-sized businesses, large enterprises, multinationals, but also governments. And suddenly they became in complete control of their future. And it was like you suddenly are in a very unique fix that, am I going to even retain my job? Now, the people out here in this session, this summit, are, I'd like to believe, amongst the more privileged lot. And we're the ones who are so-called the white collar, and you know, and we can sort of just sit on our beds and open the laptop and carry on work on very, very high productivity levels, and sort of be a little bit more comfortable with the whole idea of working from anywhere or working from home or office doesn't really matter as much. But then, you know, I was reading about a study which said that over 25% of the people who actually are in the blue collar jobs are the ones who are the weakest, you know, in any ecosystem. And they're the ones who are typically taking up work in the hotels, in the restaurant industries, in the travel industry, in the hospitals. And the ones in the hospitals are the most unfortunate, because on one side, you know, they're on the extreme end of inequality. I'm not talking about doctors here, I'm talking about the nursing staff and others. And on the other side, they're also on a very high risk of infection. So it's like double whammy for them, right? And so what we've really seen during this period is a tremendous amount of inequality kicking in at every possible level that you could think of. You know, in fact, Jordan in the earlier session spoke about, as part of the Edelman Trust Barometer, how the pandemic deepens inequities around the world. Now, I'd also like to sort of take it to, you know, sometimes we don't sort of imagine it from that lens, and why leaders then have such a big role to play as stakeholders, is that think of children for a moment. And when we think of the poor people, the people who are facing the brunt of the pandemic from all sides, we also forget that they're not just the people who are supposed to keep their jobs and feed their families, but they were also trying to educate their children. And I think some of us have been extremely privileged to have our children studying in schools who could literally operate from home, and it was quite okay. But we are actually facing a very, very extreme situation now, with millions and millions of children out of school. And they certainly cannot afford great internet connections and teachers who could teach, you know, online. And here is a situation where they suddenly are going to be disconnected, you know, from the society, from the ecosystem. You know, they were anyway disadvantaged, you know, so, and it's going to just sort of increase the intensity of the inequity out there. And that basically means that you're also talking about a potential political instability in many countries around the world. And for a change, it's not just the developing or the emerging economies of the world, but you will see this even in the developed economies of the world. And so in that sense, you know, I think leaders are in a very, very unique situation. They will have to choose their style of leadership very differently. And there is one very particular style of leadership which I have personally experienced, but I've also sort of seen it as a very effective behavior. It may not be the dominant behavior in a normal situation, but in this situation, a few people, I wouldn't say all of them, maybe about just less than 10%, have displayed what you call as servant leadership, you know, where, you know, you sort of look at the entire situation very, very differently. You don't think about leadership as a bunch of people who are following you and you are in charge of their fortunes and their future. But it's really about, you know, the fact that the most effective leaders are actually servants of their people, and they get results for their organization through wholehearted attention to the needs of the people. And in that sense, you know, there are a set of traits which are becoming very, very important. You know, top of it is empathy, you know, followed by selflessness, humility. And when you expand that list, you're talking about authenticity, being caring, collaborating, being compassionate, being very honest, being open-minded, you know, being very, I would say being patient, and I would say also being self-aware. Now, the challenge is, we have a genuine shortage of such leaders around the world. And if you look at some of the biggest economies of the world, and I'm not going to take names, but I'm also living in one of them, you do see a lot of leaders, who sometimes would take a very strong stance about their so-called role or designation as a leader, and would like to feel that they're in control. And I think that needs to change, and that becomes a sort of my key point, that leaders as stakeholders, whether it's from the sense of good governance or whether it's from the sense of leading a government, they will have to really take that servant leadership as a behavior, as a core attribute. They've got to be leading during this time.
Okay, let's keep it right there. You've said quite a mouthful, and this leads me to the next discussion that we need to have, or conversation or presentation by Mr. Soli Mueng. We've noted that stakeholders does not need to be taken light. So the observation is that there are many variations through which we talk and apply the term stakeholders, be it management, be it communication, and most importantly, the element of engagement. So certainly this has to be aligned with sustainability and branding. Okay, and to talk to us about stakeholder engagement and the United Nations Millennium Sustainability Goals and impact of branding is Mr. Soli Mueng. But I would like him to talk more on what has brand communication got to do with stakeholders and sustainability. Mr. Mueng, over to you.
Thank you very much. I love my fellow panelists. I like the fact that Saurabh mentioned the idea of poor people who don't see, they're neglected of this world, as it were. And Leslie spoke about the need to understand who your stakeholders are. If you look at, say, the United States, whether people agree with American policy or not, America has a very big, important, influential role to play in world affairs. This is not about whether you like America or you don't like America. It has an influence. And what happens when America catches the flu, everybody coughs, and we've seen, how the previous American president, Donald Trump, would decide, I'm not going to support the World Health Organization anymore. I'm going to move the US embassy to Tel Aviv, or, I don't care what the whole world will say. And all of those things have influence. So America as a brand, or your company, your individual as a brand, you need to understand who your stakeholders are. You need to understand what influence you have on them. You need to understand, as Leslie said earlier, what their stake is in your brand. So and I think that we, brand communicators, there's one expression that we don't mention often, and that I think we should mention a lot more often going into the future, into the post-COVID world, as it were. Social justice. And this is what Saurabh was talking about. Social justice, if a part of the world is not doing well, you can do well. Let's talk about Africa now. And I've got my political views on this, but there's a whole world about the whole thing about who gets the vaccines, who accepts or who can afford the vaccines. Maybe poor countries in the world, not just in Africa, in South America, in other parts of the world, who cannot afford the vaccines. Do they stay without the vaccines because they cannot afford them, or do we create a world community where we can say, look, if they don't have the vaccines, some of them are going to end up traveling to our countries, to our cities, and they're going to bring the COVID-19 here. So we live in a world where we have to take care of one another, and social justice is really important to brand communicators. And we talk about impact branding. I'm part of this concept that was created with my friends in Hungary from Capital Communications about impact branding. How do you communicate in a way that is not just selfish, traditionally selfish, just to SPR, CSI, brand communication shouldn't just be about trying to look good. It should be about being good and showing the world that you're a serious corporate citizen of the world, of the country where you live in, of the society you live in. So there's a very big link between brand communications and the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, and at the core of it is social justice. I think that there's a very increased, important need for brands to be seen to be part of the world, to be helping the poor, to be helping those who were not able to do for themselves, so that we are all united. And I think that the COVID-19 has shown to us that you can't say, you know what, I'm so wealthy, I can afford all the vaccines, I'm going to take care of my children, and show the middle finger, or, you know, hook up my nose to the rest of the world. The fact of the matter is, those people travel to your country. How do you make sure that the poor who will come to your country but who cannot afford the vaccines do not bring the COVID-19 into your space? And this is just one example. So, and I'm going to stop there. The important thing about stakeholders is understand who your stakeholders are, and you need to broaden the concept of stakeholder from shareholders, employees, and the people who live next to the company when you operate, or who, you know, you need to broaden it. Everybody. We live in a world where everybody is a stakeholder in a direct way, indirect way. Whatever you say as a brand is going to be picked up on social media, on Twitter, on Facebook, on other social media platforms within seconds. The next thing you are speaking in Cape Town, the next thing you are in Kuala Lumpur, the next thing you are in Zambia, Lusaka, or you are in Canada, Toronto, or you are in a very remote part of the United States, South America, etc. And those things will impact on how you are perceived as a brand and the extent to which you are taken seriously.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nguyen. It is evident, therefore, ladies and gentlemen, that every organization have a stakeholder. The first step is to identify them, consider their needs. And when we look at stakeholders, you must look at stakeholders from the organization needs. Now, we've had some very great insights and some thought leadership from the experts. What I would like to do now is, before I go back to probe on some of the things that were raised, open up the floor for questions. And just speak, just say, when you ask a question, please mention your name and where you're from, and then go straight to the question. To the panelists, please also take notes of the question. I will try and do the same on my side so that
Victor.
we don't waste time. Yes, sir.
Victor.
All right.
Victor,
Over to you.
if I may. Sorry for disturbing you, my friend. We had Janina Dobajkowska as a speaker as well, and Janina couldn't make it, but she has a substitute, Masha, with her profile. So, Masha, if you listen to me, please make the short presentation on behalf of Janina, because she was about to be part of the panel.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm very glad to be with you, and I will be very short. So it's a really big honor for me to represent Janina Dobajkowska, and now I will read her speech that she has prepared for you. Dear colleagues, I'm so happy that I am with you again. So let me share some key points about new reality in which we all find ourselves nowadays. First of all, I don't think that a stakeholder is still a relevant term for identifying our neighbors, our partners in business and social environment. I think so because we live now with a new, much more high level of understanding of such things as sincerity, truth, and trust. We take it all as very valuable parts of our personal and corporate life. So it is the first point. And the second one is that now we have an absolutely new type of leadership. That means much more responsibility, even more authenticity and personal influence than before. So COVID like a big metronome for big orchestra, and it has become a push for us to dream bigger and to think deeper before acting and telling something. And the key features of modern and real leader is that in these 3 points. First, listen more than speak. Second, support more than motivate. And the third, to lead and to inspire more than control. This is the second point. And the third one is that we live in a new world with new realities. And in this new reality, we should be ourselves as a brand and to do real things and to bring real values in any activity we are doing now. And I'm sure that all of you don't know who I am, and thanks to Mr. Maxim Behar, who brings new members in our community and enriches it with new, interesting, bright personalities. And let me briefly introduce myself and what I have been doing for 4 years in the field of influence. So I'm leading a gender project, the Women Influence Community, and influence can be defined as psychologically and sociologically term, and generally it is a really very big and new power. And this power is based not on fear, not on discipline, but it is based on values. And I think that influence is the only type of power that can work in the post-COVID world, because all people who have faced pandemic challenges now are focused on value of life, of trust, sustainability, much more than before. Thank you for attention.
Thank you, Masha. It was the speech written by Janina. Janina is one of the co-founders of the World Communication Forum Association, very good friend of many, many of us. My predecessor as president, she was not be able to come, she's in Moscow now, but living in Lusaka, Zambia for the past couple of years, and running also this women influence community. So I see so many friends who I know here, and of course I see Dr. Carter, with whom we were exactly 2 years ago in Harvard, studying very hard, leadership, opinion making. I was arguing with my new friend, I hope, Charlie Shapiro, who I never met before, but Charlie was sending me a message, thank you very much for the seminar. And I said, no way, this is not a seminar, it's a summit. So why this is a summit? Because you guys are really top professionals. Peter Mutia from Kenya, I see here. Leslie, who I never met before. Of course, Cesare Valli, who is our supervisor today. And at the end of the show, he will make a wrap-up and he will tell us where we were wrong and where we did something good. Now we move to the second panel, who will be run by Jacqueline Stryer, not Smokey. She was Smokey something like 5 minutes ago, but my assistant Jessica was correcting the straight name. So from now on, you are Jacqueline Stryer, Jackie. And also we have Hesham Mesbah. I hope that Hesham is here. Nurul Shamsuri, dear friend of us, from the bottom of our heart. And Tatevik Simonian, Spring PR, the newest brand new member, corporate member of the World Communications Forum. So, Madame Smokey, it's your turn.
Thank you so much, Maxim, and it's a pleasure to be here. It's a long story how I come up as Smokey, but a long story short, it used to be one of the cats we had, and my very young son at the time named my computer that, and it's never left me. So thank you for changing that in the so that everybody can see who I really am. And thanks to my panelists. I just really want to give a shout out because I have a lot of friends, colleagues, and clients who are on today, as well as many of my students from New York University and Columbia University, who I'm so really delighted to see here today. And also I counted, we have over 40 countries here on our summit, which is really exciting to see such a global audience. We're going to be talking about education, kind of present and future and where we see it. And one of the things that really became really relevant to me when I was talking to our panelists, not all of whom I knew before we actually engaged in this activity, is how we come from very different circumstance and how we've actually learned and actually pivoted in this circumstance. We have Hesham, who is based in Florida at Rollins College, who is chair of their communications department, and he's originally from Egypt. And he comes with a vast cultural heritage that actually informs his teaching and his leading his organization where he is. We have Nurul Shamsuri, who comes to us from Malaysia, who not only is a faculty member at a university, but also is an entrepreneur in the field and can share a little bit about what she's doing and why she's had to change her work there in that reality. And then we have Tatovik Simonian, who comes to us from Armenia. Armenia, which is a place that has not only had to deal with the pandemic, but a country in conflict. And so she has had to deal with different realities than many of us have had to deal with in the past year. So with that, I'd like to turn first to our first two panelists who've actually been teaching at the university level. Tatovik also told me she used to teach at the university level, but then she has a little one, and so she wasn't able to do that in the recent time. So with that, Hashem, and I'm going to ask you first, and then I'm going to ask Nurul to respond to the same question. When the pandemic occurred, and kind of your years in the classroom were informed by a different model, what are some of the ways in which you had to pivot to basically face the realities that we were confronted with in the pandemic in order to be successful to engage your students? So I'll ask Hashem first. Is Hashem here?
Yes, I am here. Thank you, Jacqueline, for the question, and thanks for this wonderful gathering and these important topics. Can you hear me good?
We can.
All right, great. Jacqueline, when the pandemic hit, it was kind of, as we started to scramble around how to deal with that. Are we going to keep doing what we've been doing? Do we need to change? How to maintain our classroom culture with this environment? So it didn't take a long time to decide on the process. So the process was planned based on the learning outcomes that we need to achieve. What's the classroom culture that we have and that we need to maintain in this new situation? Our classroom culture is engagement, experiential learning. And this philosophy that education is not an outcome, but it's a process that leads to producing knowledge and being part of the community, not just being surrounded by the walls in the classroom and isolated from the community. That's what we believe in education and how it should be. Okay, if that's the classroom culture that we have, how to maintain that in the new environment. We came up with this liberal plan of making all options open for the students. So we created a hybrid classroom. Those students who are willing to come to the classroom, they can, with the restrictions and the precautions that we have taken. And we also allowed those virtual students to log in live and be part of the classroom. And with this hybrid teaching in the classroom live, we could maintain the classroom culture and increase the engagement through the use of open source online technology in order to keep the students virtually engaged with us in the classroom in person. And there are wonderful open source online tools that you can engage your students with, like they can do live surveys, they can write on a board and share the board with the classroom in person. They can to play video games, and the video games could be part of the classroom learning activities. With engagement with the community, we also created, because we have this philosophy of doing surface learning and community engagement, and I'm gonna talk about that later on. But we started to think of ways how to keep the community engagement with the pandemic. So if we have a partner, a nonprofit organization partner who has plans and they need help with that, we started thinking of how we can help digitally with that, and we came up with a successful plan to keep doing what we've been doing with the pandemic.
Wonderful. It's really, and interesting because at NYU and Columbia, we had both in person as well as online students at the same time, the hybrid classroom. So I think that was a model that a lot used. Nurul, what did you find in Malaysia in terms of what happened in the classroom and some of the techniques that you use to keep people engaged that, build on what we just heard from Hashem?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. First of all, I would like to thank everybody. I mean, this is a very wonderful way to connect. Usually we'll meet in Davos, but unfortunately that's not happening now. So shout out to old friends, new friends. It's very nice to be connected. And also some Malaysians are here as well. It's very late. So I would like to give shout out to Malaysians that's still here at midnight. So thanks for staying in. I feel that Dr. Hisham already touched a lot of parts in terms of pivoting in as an educator. But for me personally, it's tough when everything moves online. When if you are the kind of educator that need physical touch with your students. So I am very close with my student that way. So when things are moving online, most part that was challenging was how do you make sure, despite the physical limitations, the effectiveness of the learning is still happening. And at the same time, not only for students, I think for educators as well, how do we adjust ourselves emotionally and mentally with these changes, So while we managing and pivoting that, we also have to make sure that we are effectively contributing the development of the student through whatever means that is available. But I have to say that we are doing quite well. I mean, I miss the classroom environment. It can never be replaced. I would say I miss being with my students, but it is what it is. And I guess we, as educator, we're talking about leadership in turbulent times. We are in turbulent times, so we need to be able to pivot and use whatever technology that is available to be as effective as possible for our students or our learners, basically.
I think that's really insightful. And one of the things that I like to build on, and then I want to ask a question of Tatevik, is that one of the things that I found in the classroom is that we can bring world-class speakers to guest lecture because it's virtual and they can be anywhere. And so I've actually had in my classroom astonishingly brilliant people that would not have been able to guest lecture because of the fact that we're on the technology platform. So that's also become an advantage to engage students in this reality. Now, Tatevik comes to us from a different situation. She is in a public relations firm, a distinguished one in Armenia, and she found some interesting issues that she had to deal with her clients and from a skills level, and her agency addressed them in the pandemic. Tatevik, can you share with us what you did?
Thanks, Jacqueline. For sure, yes. But first of all, let me extend my sincere regards to all the participants and organizers. And thanks, Maxim. It's my absolute pleasure to participate in this panel and present the Armenian perspective. And yes, as you have rightly pointed out, Armenia has to deal with two major crises, the global pandemic and the Azerbaijani-Turkish aggression against Artsakh and Armenia. And yes, I fully agree with Barbara Bates that PR is one of the most amazing but stressful professions, especially when you are in such a situation. And let me go to the pandemic and say that yes, when the pandemic was at its apex, the demand for PR profession was at its top as never before. And from our experience, we can say that before the pandemic, most of the organizations were quite skeptical of having a crisis strategy. And when the worldwide crisis knocks the doors, the executives realized the importance of crisis management, strategic planning, and as we were dealing with behavioral changes, of course, research methods, and asking us to strengthen their teams, they realized the importance of education and are ready to invest in their employees' education more than
before, and as there was a huge demand for knowledge and as formal education didn't have solution like short solutions, we as an agency try to make flexible and short-term solutions for the market demand via the tools of non-formal education. And firstly, we conducted research on how the professionals are responding to the crisis and identified typology and elaborated on the plot of the training for the different organizations. And it's very interesting that the executives, CEOs, general directors, founders of SMEs, large businesses, they wanted communication training for themselves too. And they can be, and they didn't want to be just an observer, but as Jordan mentioned from Edelman, public want them to lead, to take a lead, and they must participate and be fully engaged. So they want to understand what is communication, especially the crisis communication, in order to make better decisions, and how to communicate, because all eyes on them. And as the main format, we proposed 4 hands trainings involving professional both from Spring PR and, as you mentioned, Jacqueline, very good opportunity, our international experts, our international network, because we want the executives to combine both our Armenian and international expertise and perspective. So it was another interesting point, that it was quite interesting that we got offers from the fields which have never approached for the communications and especially trainings. So among them was the scientific community, because 2020 came to prove that science more than ever needs communication. So it's our perspective on this point.
Thank you so much. It's interesting. And I want to follow on to, there's so many wonderful points that you're all making, but I'd like to follow on to the points that Hashem made, because he's in a part of Florida where his college has a very special relationship with the community. And in the pandemic and even before the pandemic, they shared a very special relationship that connected students with the community. Hashem, can you talk about that and how that became incredibly important in this moment?
Well, we have a center on campus that's called the Center for Leadership and Community Engagement. And it's kind of a college body, and it offers relationships and partners or partnership with community partners, mainly non-profit organizations. So we have about 250 non-profit organizations who are partnering with this center. And this has been going on since 2013. And this center will get in touch with the academic departments, asking them what classes that you would like to offer as a community engagement class. In our communication department, we usually elect the classes that offer hands-on experience for the students, like communication campaigns, media and public relations, health communication, and we connect with the community partners. And based on this partnership, the students will connect with the partner and this nonprofit organization, and will design programs that will help this organization carry out these objectives, especially if this organization for underserved segments in the audience, like autism patients or homeless organizations for homeless people. And we have conducted several programs. Every year we do that. When the pandemic hit, we kind of adjusted our connection and partnership with those organizations to keep doing what we want our students to do, because this is part of our philosophy of experiential learning. So the students practice their connection with the client virtually. We do online surveys and we do research for them if they want to do this kind of service, like if they want to gather information from their audiences. Like in one of the organizations, we did a survey with the parents of the children who are served by that organization. we did on campus activities, and that helped the partners as well. Like for the one of the organizations, we did an activity on campus. It was called Pie Your Professor, and that was a fundraising. The professor will wear like a mantra and sit in an open area, and the students will get a raw pie, and for each pie, a student will pay $5 to hit the professor that they would like to take their revenge against in a very funny situation. And I think we gathered about $1,000 that was sent to that organization. So the students learn how to plan their campaigns, and we do the service for the community partners. And according to the research that we have done, it showed that students engaged in this kind of community service, learning service, they had more positive attitude, and they had a more positive recognition of the learning experience that they had.
Fantastic. My students who are listening don't get any ideas about the pie thing that he just talked about. So I'd like to actually ask a question of Nurul in terms of her business. So she created a skills-based program to provide students with essential skills that they need in the, to get jobs, to be successful in organizations. Can you tell us a little bit about that briefly, and also how you had to change that in the pandemic and kind of where it is now?
Thank you, Jacqueline. Actually, the history, the startup that I have is called Clue to the Zoo. I know it's a fun name, but it's actually to give clues to the working life, which is a zoo for us. And it comes from the idea is that every year, university is organizing meeting with industry players about what needs to be done for graduates. So year after year, even I was one of the people who organizing the meeting between academics and industries about how to prepare graduate for the working life. However, every year we're sitting in that meeting. After the meeting, everybody had a cup of coffee and everybody go home and nothing's changed. Every year we talk about how our students need to be prepared for more working life, to have more emotional intelligence, leadership skills. They need to have more creativity. But why are we discussing this every year and nothing's changed? I'm in academic for almost 8 years now. So eventually, it's just a matter of fate. I made a partner who actually shared the same sentiment, and we decided, well, it's time for someone to do something about this. I mean, we don't know. We've been doing this for 2 years. We don't know how much differences we're going to make for our graduate preparedness for working life, but the feedback that we receive is positive all this while. And in terms of pivoting, our original business model is to offer workshops physically. So basically they come and then they get training and then they go home. However, because of the pandemic, we have to pivot really, really fast, which means we're offering everything online now, which is for me, despite that I love being in the classroom, is actually a blessing in disguise, because right now I'm not confined geographically, which means that students that are not in Kuala Lumpur, maybe they are in, the Sabah or Sarawak is far away from the big city, they can also participate. And at the same time, we can offer our module much, much cheaper, which means we make the possibility of learning for our graduate to prepare them for working life, one, affordable, secondly, scalable and reachable for everybody. I mean, I miss being in the class and holding physical workshops, but at the same time to know that we can disseminate knowledge in much more effective way is also something that makes me really, really happy. So I guess I hope that, Clue to the Zoo keep giving clues for students to prepare them for the working life, which is a complete big zoo out there. So.
It's interesting, and I will have a final question for Tatevik. Is my first class that I taught when I started at NYU was a course called Critical Business Skills for PR. It was all the skills that you needed to be successful, but that weren't PR. And one of the things I learned was exactly that if I was actually sitting in the seat what did I actually need to know to be successful? And so, you know, building relationships and networks, critical thinking, strategy, those all became things that I kind of morphed the syllabus to address, rather than some of the kind of things that I had inherited. So it's wonderful to work in a place that gives you that flexibility. And also it's great that you're providing those skills-based learnings for students that really need them. Tadevik, I have a question for you. So one of the things that's fascinating is that out of your learning over the past year, you've been able to actually propose and get the government approval on a new bachelor's program at the university. Can you succinctly tell us about this? We have a few more minutes before we have to move to Q&A.
So yes, let me to take a short review. Of course, for us, PR is the chain of decision making, and during the crisis, more than ever, it is vital not to make mistakes. And for having professionals, we need them to be educated. And you know, PR is a relatively new educational discipline in Armenia, and it's hard to believe, but only 15 years ago, the Armenian business community perceived PR as an advertisement or sales, and the PR is mainly used by politicians and mostly in the political sector. Then the PR was considered as a part of marketing, which is more familiar to the business. And it's been only a decade that in Armenia we have PR and communication master's program in the Yerevan State University, which is the leading higher educational institution. And as the lobbyists of having PR as a separate academic discipline, yes, we were fighting for the opportunity to open a PR and communication bachelor program. And the process of registration started in the first quarter of 2019. And our proposal and program had been approved by Armenian government in the end of last year. And I do hope that it's because they realized the need.
So that's fantastic. So you were able to convince the government to basically create a new bachelor's program at the university level.
Yeah.
Yeah, you short circuit the process. In the US, things take a lot longer at the academic level to create a kind of new program. So congratulations.
Let's say thanks to COVID, really.
Oh, okay. Oh, interesting. So it's interesting. There are some positive things that actually come out of this situation that we've been in. So. Yes. So I would say very quickly, I want to ask one quick question of the panel. What do you think are the most important skills right now based on what we've lived through in the practice? Just one sentence answer.
Very quick.
Hashem?
Just to be able to adjust really quick.
Be able to pivot.
Adaptability is like you have to evolve really fast. Things change in a very rapid way that you can't even brain. Who knows that we're going to be in this situation? One sentence is you just have to adjust like really, really fast.
Adjust. Hashem, what would you say?
Well, to be observant in adjusting, and there are things that are unexpected that you need to get ready for. For instance, how to evaluate faculty if they are teaching virtually. Also, do we need policy changes for attendance in the pandemic? So many things started to show up that were unexpected, and it needed some observation for us to make sure that we're meeting those unexpected situations.
Fantastic. And a sentence from you, Tadevik, in terms of skills necessary?
Yes,
right now?
I can add that, yes, PR identity loading changes. And of course, the market needs professionals with professional knowledge and experience, but also some other competencies, like we have discussed, we must be listeners, non-talkers, etc. But like creativity, communicativeness, collaboration, and critical thinking. And from our side, I will add also the stress resilience.
Fantastic. Okay, so we're gonna open up. We have a few minutes here for questions. Thank you, panelists. That was great, and there are a number of questions here in the chat, I believe. One of the questions was for those who are educators in the classroom. How are you seeing the trends going in terms of in-person versus hybrid versus totally remote? I mean, and then there's asynchronous and synchronous classes. What do you see happening? I'm going to ask first. I'm going to ask Nurul, and then I'm going to ask Hashem on that.
Can you rephrase the question again?
The trends. Do you see the trends towards students wanting to be in person,
okay,
forward, online, hybrid, asynchronous, synchronous? There's all these different models that are basically out there right now. Where do you see this going?
I would say, even though I don't really have a crystal ball to actually predict what's going to happen in the future, however, I feel that COVID has changed learning it completely, I would say. That e-learning is no longer something inferior. You know, before e-learning is something at the back of our mind, we don't actually do it. But right now we know that it's possible, it can reach more people. In my hunch, I would say it will be hybrid because we still need engagements, and there are things that not children, but university students could learn in online learning, but cannot be replaced with physical classes, you know, like how to interact with people, networking, all of those real life skills they still need to do in classroom. So I would say that moving forward, a hybrid learning would be the trend if I'm right. I'm not sure, but I think
if you could see into the future, which none of us really know, that's helpful.
Yeah.
Heshan, what do you see? Do you agree with Neural that we're going to actually move to this just hybrid model, or do you see it really going more one way than the other where you are?
Yes, I mean, education and technology, now they are married, and I think it's a Catholic marriage, even after the pandemic. We have conducted a study at the end of last semester to see how the students are evaluating the learning experience that they had during the pandemic. And to our astonishment, the average scores of the teaching faculty did not go down. Actually, some faculty had an improvement in their teaching scores in the pandemic, which means that the technology that has been introduced into the classroom actually worked positively during the pandemic, and I don't see any reason that this use of technology will be discontinued.
And then one other question that I'm getting here is: do you see that what trends in terms of where the jobs are in PR based on what you're hearing from employers? From all three of you, I'll ask you that question.
There are about in the United States right now, there are about 270,000 PR jobs, and it's estimated that within 9 years this number will go up to 290,000. So there is going to be an increase by 7% in the PR jobs in this country. And that means there is a high demand for people filling PR roles, either in the agency level or the corporate level. And that's why PR education is trending. I see new PR departments opening here in the United States and all over the world. There is a huge body of research about what kind of skills that are needed in the new hires in PR. And it's showing that social media management is one of the top skills required right now. Storytelling is one of the top skills that are needed. When they surveyed PR people, what's the main weakness that you're facing in your daily job, it turned out that it's measurement. So teaching PR now requires some statistical and technical background in order to perform more efficiently in the future.
Interesting. So a mix. So Tatovic, if I was to ask that question of you, because you were able to convince the government to create this bachelor's degree, albeit we have a significant issue right now that we're facing, the pandemic, and there was this lack of skills that you were able to convince them of. But if you were to, kind of advise what you're seeing in your part of the world in terms of the need for PR professionals and where you see the future of the practice in your part of the world.
So I think that regarding the classroom, it's hybrid in Armenia. I want to add my point of view, and I would like to add that, for example, youngsters in Armenia are more ready for behavioral change. And from our experience, I can state that they prefer online because they can more easily combine work and study and always attend classes. And regarding what will be in future, it will be as now, no boundaries. So, and because of that, we are enlarging our international cooperation, cooperating with professional networks like WCFA, EPRASI, IPR, top PR agencies, involving international experts, delivering ethical communications, and bringing our expertise to both formal and non-formal education. And I do believe that organizations not only need to assess the course of the crisis, but they also need to think about the company's position after these crises, being ready for the behavioral changes and start thinking on the post-crisis communication, which will bring, of course, new demand to the education and profession also.
One of the things that you and I talked about, Tatevik, which I didn't have a chance to ask you, was English and the importance of knowing English in PR in Armenia. How is it being taught in the university there, this new bachelor's degree? And if not in English, how are you going to help your students be able to be conversant in English?
Yes, it's very Armenian point because it's very important quality, which becomes one of the goal of PR education, is to prepare polyglot experts. And in the globalized world, when there are no boundaries, foreign language skills are very important. And in our bachelor degree, of course, we will have foreign languages course, both English and Russian, but I would make note that according to our educational system, the applicants of the universities are accepted after passing the must English exam. So besides during the first years of bachelor, they are studying languages. Moreover, we offer to have a business English course during the master's degree. So it's really important to have polyglot experts.
Actually, that's really interesting that that's a requirement in order to enter the university. So that's really, that was something that's new to me. So I really appreciate your sharing that. As we look at it, one of the things that I'm seeing in the chat here is the focus on analytical and being able to actually understand data and do that. Do any of you like to, Hashem, Tatevik, Neural, for our last question, where do you see that heading in terms of having that really strong statistical, analytical capability going forward?
Let me answer. As we are all sociologists in Spring PR, we bring this also to PR education, and it's very important to know the research methods, to understand the society, and to know how to find the good solutions by the help of research methods. So it's one of the main points, and in bachelor program, in master program, students are studying sociological methods, theories, everything, so to have the knowledge on this too.
Anything that you'd like to add to that, Hashem, or
Yes, it's a challenge facing PR people, and this challenge is, well, what's the impact of your work? How effective is your work? And you cannot say that my work is effective and that's word of mouth. You need to provide that with, you need to provide evidence, and the evidence should be numeric and statistical. So you need to learn how to conduct research, how to use formal and informal ways to conduct research, how to use analytics in order to provide data that show exactly how your work made a difference for your client if you did. And that requires more technical statistical knowledge, and the design of the curricula in the schools should also adjust into this pathway.
Thank you for that. Neural, did you have anything that you wanted to add to that in terms of skills?
Actually, I agree with both of the panelists in terms of all the skills that you need, like research and statistical data. But based on what I also want to add when it comes to the development of the students moving forward in COVID, almost all the articles or journals are still mentioning the skills that is needed for students moving forward, or because I'm big on soft skills. So basically things like resilience, critical thinking, and creativity, emotional intelligence is still something that we have to focus on besides all other technical skills that we provide to our students. Because in the end of the day, we are all humans and we interact with other humans. So having both skills are, I feel, make our students moving forward as more holistic individuals.
Thank you. I want to turn over our panel, but I just want to thank our panelists for their insights in terms of how they responded to the pandemic, to their stakeholders, and how they're actually going forward in terms of creating new programs, new platforms, and new opportunities for their students. I will tell you that I came to education really from the business world. I was a CCO, CMO of 3 public companies, and 5 years ago I started teaching, and I will tell you it's the hardest job I've ever had. I will also tell you that I didn't realize how much I didn't know until I started teaching.
Thank you, Jacqueline.
People you have to know, so thank you.
Thank you very much, Jacqueline. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Excellent input, all of you. Thank you, Hesham, Nuru, Tatevik, of course, you, Jacqueline, and also absolutely on time. On my screen in front of me, I see friends from all over the world. Dr. Stephen Carter, I see Bulgaria. I think he's in Germany now, but I see Hungary. I see now Flashman Hiller from Jakarta, someone who I don't know. I see Kenya, Chile, India, Portugal, South Africa, all over the world. Even Jan Bowman from Denmark. Hello, Jan. Good to see you. So just before we move to the next session, I would like to mention 2 very special persons who are joining us today. One of them is Francis Hingham. Francis is the Chief Executive of ECO and the Director General of PRSEA, the largest public relations community, local community for one state called Great Britain in the world. And I just want to tell you that if you want to know anything about public relations, you should pay attention to ECO, to see ECO website, to participate into ECO awards, to ECO webinars. So Francis, if you want to share a couple of words, you're mostly welcome. No? Most probably he's switched off his microphone. And also I would like to thank Vlad Bazikalov. Vlad Bazikalov is the regional manager of PR Newswire, our media partner. And if you want that your word is spread out and your press release is heard or read, just go to PR Newswire. And thank you very much, Vlad, for the good cooperation. Now we continue with Davos Communications Summit. And we move to the ethics in the post-pandemic communications. Such an important topic. Ethics, transparency, integrity, morality. And I give the floor to Jean-Hans Koetzer, one of our vice presidents, who will manage the panel. Jean-Hans, please.
Your Royal Highness, ladies and gentlemen, Maxim, friends from across time zones, from across different regions of the world, a warm welcome. I just want to ask Max, because I do not see my panelists online.
Okay, so excellent. Nice to hear this, and this is a good panel for all the families.
And I would just like to, before we start to introduce, just to renew the invitation to say, ladies and gentlemen, please use the opportunity to join the World Communications Forum Association. We need you to assist us to amplify the voices and the messages that you've heard during these important panel discussions. And I hope that with my colleagues, the panelists, we're going to be able to also keep the bar very high in delivering and adding value to this all-important discussion about ethics in the post-pandemic world related to communication. So we're going to fast forward a little bit, and we're not going to focus on our COVID reality, but we are going to see post-COVID, how are we going to adapt. So without any ado, I would like to introduce you to Christina Forsgaard. She's the ethics chair at the International Communications Consultancy Organization. And she is also the founder of Net Profile, a communications consultant specialized in cyber crisis communication and management. We are also joined by Sofia Lakatos, and she's the former president of the Hungarian PR Association, and she is also the owner of the Emerald Public Relations Agency, and she is an affiliate of the Burson Cohen and Wolfer Agency in Hungary. And then my good friend, Stark Kohler, who is the Global Training and Delivery Manager of Whole 24 UK. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the way that I would like for us to start to get out of the starting blocks of this panel is, how do we frame, how do we define values? And I deliberately try to break away from using existing mind frameworks or paradigms, or to move away from some of these definitions that we use, because we are going to embrace a new reality and we are going through that transformational phase. But the one thing that is a constant is that ethics will remain to stay as the set of values that it's trustworthy and trustfulness, and that it's about you being responsible. And I would like us to also, in terms of this 6 drivers of change that is going to bring about, and in which we're going to operate in this new post-pandemic world, is 1, is ever-increasing complex computational world in which we're going to have to communicate and operate, the superstructural organizations to which internet technologies are contributing massively, this driving force of the globally connected world, more importantly, the new media ecology and the rise of smart machines and systems. And where are we as communicators? How are we going to continue to remain ethical? How can we contribute to build that all-important aspect of ethics? Because I think none of you will be surprised when I say our current reality, we see how trust is broken between the media, between the idea of elected officials, and as we heard, the disconnect between business, for-profit, and just the disconnect between communities and individuals, let alone the employees. So what I would like to do is start immediately, and if I can ask the first question to Christina.
Yes.
Very good. So Christina, can you please tell me, from your organizational perspective, how do you see and how do you define the application of ethics in our new reality after COVID?
First of all, I'd like to thank everyone here, you, Jan Hans, and also Max, and all you superheroes who are here. Because as we know, communications is something that all of us understand and do. But when we think about professional communicators, us, I always tell that we are sort of meta communicators. And that means that we are superheroes and we have a lot of power. We have a power to influence. And we know that with this great power comes also great responsibility. And for me, in this profession, my responsibility now is to make sure that all professional communicators in the world understand the huge responsibility they have to understand where we are and how much we can influence this world.
So that is where I come from, and I all hope that you understand how great powers you possess, and we can actually make the post-pandemic era much better with our narratives and our belief in human rights and human future.
Thank you so much, Christina. Sophia, may I please ask you as well, in terms of the way that you see this power and this responsibility that we've just heard from Christina, how do you us applying that and using it for the benefit of our profession?
Hello there. Hi, everyone from Budapest, Hungary. I completely agree with what Christina said. When it comes to ethics, what I have in mind is the basis of ethics doesn't change. It doesn't matter if we have a pandemic or no. For me, the basis of ethics when it comes to communications is tell the truth, always the truth, and understand the impact you're having on people. That's where responsibility comes in, as what Christina was talking about. What's different now is we have to understand that people are extremely frustrated. And that frustration covers everything. And, you know, we could do a survey here, but I'm sure we have 146 people in this call. I'm sure that 145 at least of them will say that they are frustrated. We're all frustrated. And when people are frustrated, that means that they don't take decisions, they don't make decisions as they normally would, because their frustration inhibits them from understanding communication, others' communication, and from communicating. And this is something that we have to keep in mind as professional communicators, that when I say something in normal times to people, they may take it one way. But when they are frustrated, like now, they may take it in another totally different way. And that might trigger them to do things that I don't want them to do. You know, really tragic things like commit suicide or murder, or just not feeling good. So I think that us professionals should stay on the level where we were before, ethically. And up on that came this new era, this new factor into the picture, that is the frustration that we have to understand.
Sophia, thank you so much, because what you say is so true. The way in which we deliver a message, we have to pay so much attention, because it's not necessarily what we say, but it's what is understood by what we've said. That is so true. Thank you so much. And I would just like to call everybody's attention, because another message from Sophia, if you read what she has behind the chair, is everything is going to be okay.
Oh yeah, did you see that? You see that was put there on purpose, because I wanted to communicate to you guys that, hey, relax, it's all gonna be good. In the end, it's all gonna be good.
Perfect example of walking your talk. Thank you so much. Shah, can I ask you to expand for us also about this idea of power, responsibility, but telling the truth? And can I challenge you a little bit and say, but at the end of the day, we are all I mean, we need to contribute to the triple bottom line. We have to, the businesses with whom we have contracts will give us very clear guidelines. So how do we make sure that we can act as a moral compass in delivering that trustworthy, powerful, responsible message?
Yes, that's a very good question, Jan Hans, and thank you all for having me here. I'm very honored. Greetings from the Netherlands, as you can see with the fresh bunch of tulips there. I hope you can all hear and see me well. By the way, this is my name for the people that like visual support indeed, so then you can't be mistaken with that. And before I answer your question, Jan Hans, I heard someone in the chat saying something very truthful today. We are here on these screens, but we don't hear each other. So what I'm going to try, because I connected a few wires, I'm the nerd here in the room, as they say, and I want to have an applause for everyone organizing this and for the whole audience. So we all going to join with clapping, and I hope this works out. Thank you very much. Yes, I don't see all the videos there, but once again, thank you all 150 people around to be there. Going back to your questions, yeah, how can we communicate truthful? I think in the panel before, what was his name? I wrote it down. Hesham, yeah, thank you. You mentioned indeed the value of statistics and being truthful. Well, I think, having a background as a computer scientist, that we do need to rely on facts. And I'll come back on that a bit later, but that's, I think, a critical thing in these post-pandemic communication. Too many things have gone wrong, and we have to rely on these digital tools, which we do today, and I'm happy about that. But how do we make sure everything is factful and truthful? Well, that's requires some understanding, and what I did for all of you, let me see if I can show that quickly on the screen. Bear with me for a second. What you see here, I think, is a small diagram showing 3 things I always use when talking about ethics in communication. One is, yes, you have to be ethical, but you can't do that without understanding logic and having knowledge of the topic. We heard a lot of trainers and professors today. I'm a trainer as well, and those kind of 3 things together, that says it all for me. Truthful communication comes from understanding logic, I'll dive into that later, having the understanding of ethics, and obviously be knowledgeable about the topic where you speak about. Go away. Over to you, Hans.
Thank you very much. If I can loop back to you, Sophia. In the panel before, we heard about the importance about education and training. How do we as communicators, as business owners, how do we make sure that we can deliver, but based on the specificity, that we don't look through our own cultural or national perspectives, but that we can deliver real value based on the complexities of our recipients, of our different businesses? How do we build that bridge so that those deliverables will act not just as business profit, but as enablers for the very communities that rely on communication?
To answer that question, let me tell you my credo, what I think about public relations, and you're going to understand in a second why. I truly believe that we are a gift of God to this world, and people laugh at me for saying that, but I do believe that, and the reason for that is I think that public relations people, we help people understand each other. And most chaos and conflict happens because people misunderstand each other, maybe on purpose, but they misunderstand each other. And when I say people, I mean businesses, NGOs, politics, governments, etc. So our job is to translate the message that, help them form the message first that's in their head and translate it in a way that it's understood, and vice versa, interaction. So answering your question, I think that 1 is people are frustrated. 2 is people are changing. The people today, what they care about, how to grab their attention is totally different than it was 20 years ago. I've been in PR for over 20 years, so I can compare. And I think we need to live up to the expectation and communicate in a way that they understand. Now that may hurt sometimes, because, for example, if I write a press release, sometimes I want to put the word innovation in the press release. Now, if I do, that's never going to be published, right? At least in Hungary, because I have to reword it in a way to make it sexy so that the journalists will understand and want to publish it. And I have to word it in a way where people will understand what I'm trying to say. And that might not be the style that I normally use in communication, But I need to understand that the public expects something else. And back to the frustration that I was talking about, I need to be super careful in how I say things, you know, like when you're trying to comfort somebody who's crying and then you or grieving, and you really need to be careful with the words that you use. I think it's the same here. So we basically have to think twice before communicating anything, and we have to think 3 steps ahead and try to pre-measure the outcome that our communication will have on people in this frustrated world that we live.
Thank you so much, Sophia. Christina, may I ask you, did you want to respond to?
Yes, well, I don't know if you wanted to ask this, but Sophia really started a good sort of good going there. The narrative was good because the frustration, if we all remember where the situation before pandemic, people were frustrated because of the climate change. That was like the #1 issue, because of Greta and the younger people, we were talking about climate change. All of a sudden that sort of went away, even though the problem is still there, but now we are worried about the pandemic. And now we have 5 crises in our hands at the same time. So we have the pandemic, and because of the pandemic, we have the economical crisis as well. And we have always had problems with racism and oppression and hardship and indigenous people or where it is, you know, or women, Me Too movement. And then we have a crisis of democracy and human rights in many countries. And they all come also from pandemic, but also because of the climate change. It's a human crisis, human rights crisis. And all of this, that they all translate to what Sophia was saying, the enormous frustration that we feel that, you know, we have been stripped away from our basic human rights, lockdowns, definitely, or bans to open your business, because in democracy, you have that fundamental right. So we have to understand that we now live in a very flammable world where a lot of frustration is just waiting for, it's like a tank fuel of benzene or gasoline. And if we can light the fire very easily, if we don't understand that, we really have to be very responsible and look at the consequences of our actions. So therefore I really turn into you or everyone, because I think what Sophia also said, we are the angels basically on earth, and it is our responsibility to make sure that we don't add gasoline to this or fuel or light or fire into this gasoline that we have in front of us. I don't know if you wanted to ask me this, but this is something that I felt that Sophia sort of played it out.
Thank you so much, Christina. We have 5 minutes left before we go into the question and answer session. What I would like is to loop back to Jacques to start his concluding comments, but I would also like each one of you to put out a challenge to all of us connected here today. What can we do to positively contribute rather than just disconnecting and say that was a nice moment, there were some valuable points, but again, there are no real deliverables that we as individuals takes responsibility for to make sure that we can help to build back better. Jacques.
Yes, thank you, Jan Hans. When thinking about ethics, you can go very theoretical, but a lot of cases have been made today about the facts, and we're just saying it. I think so far you closed it, how are we going to measure it? And I have in the last years worked in data science, so I've been digesting a lot of data, and you want to make good conclusions on that. So if you ask about a challenge, I would say make sure that you make yourself familiar with the latest technologies there. It doesn't have to be deep mathematics. Actually, Christina, one of your neighbors from Sweden, wrote an excellent book on that one. It's called Factfulness, and probably a lot of you have heard about it. And I would recommend to everyone who hasn't read it yet, I'll put an example here. I think I have it, a copy here, yeah. So you can see it on the screen. That's the one, and it takes such a brilliant look at the world, like, hey, how can we be so wrong about certain numbers? And going back to Sophia here, the world is a better place than we think already. Things go better than we think. So if I may give that as a, well, I can't give it away as a present. It wasn't a very expensive book I've seen. And as a bonus, you get a lot of insight in how a humanitarian world is looking like. I'm sure Jon Hans knows a lot more about that. But together with understanding how facts are really can be assessed, which you need to do, because if you read the newspapers and the news, and we talked about media, you can be put on the wrong foot, as they say. And I would like to recommend everyone take a factual approach, be humble, stay gentle, of course, but do it on a base of understanding what we're talking about. So that's what I would like to conclude with, but I'm sure the ladies can add to that.
Thank you very much, Sophia.
You know what I was thinking while I was listening to you guys is that I think that what we're going through right now, this pandemic and trying to communicate in this era, is just a rehearsal of what we will go through in a few years or decades time when it comes to green issues. I'm a sustainability expert, had a book published in London a few years ago. I'll add the link later if you're interested. And I think that it's like a wave, you know, like the ocean, that there's a big wave coming, or we're in a big wave right now, that's the pandemic. But there's a much bigger wave coming, much bigger shit, if I may say that we're facing, and that's the climate change. And I think that the fact that we need to communicate in frustration and keeping in mind what we're saying, because there'll be consequences and we have to be super careful, that's gonna be even worse when people will feel what climate change means for them. So I look at this whole thing as we are preparing for something much bigger that's coming. Some issues that we're gonna have to handle when it comes to no water and mass migration and you know, dangerous spiders everywhere and all that stuff. You know, I'm not gonna go into details. So I was very happy that beforehand in some of the panels and speakers, I actually heard the expression sustainability, because I think that it's time we start talking about that. Professional communicators, what we're learning from this pandemic communication and how to prepare for the sustainability communication, trying to make it sexy so it will go through people. So I'm calling Max now and giving a proposal to Maxim to make this the topic of next year's Davos Summit. Hopefully we'll be like way over the pandemic, and then we can talk about sustainability. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Sophia. I also had a message from you, from Shakespeare, who said, please tell Sophia, I absolutely love her unique command of the English language. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Christina, please.
Yes, because the frustration and the turmoil that we have, I think our perspectives and people's perspectives have really narrowed down. And we just see our own navel, as we have this expression in Finnish, that we're just looking at ourselves. And what we need to bring to the table is hope. Hope. We need hope. And the narratives that we tell ourselves and tell others, they need to carry hope. And we need to get people to look beyond themselves, because now, of course, we are protecting ourselves from all these bad things. So we need to start opening up and look for the future where we communicate, we are much brighter. I really like the education panel, because I'm a strong believer in the 21st century life skills and astronaut skills. They usually are told that they're astronaut skills. And I'd like to conclude this by saying that I don't know how many of you got goosebumps from the Mars rover Perseverance and the moment that NASA played the first sound of Mars. And I think for me, it was a sound of hope, in a way that together, when we work together, we can do amazing things, sounds from Mars. And I think we need to sort of start looking at the future and give hope to people.
Thank you. And allow me just to conclude, because Your Royal Highness, ladies and gentlemen, those of you who joined us, I think what the panelists allow me to say, what you all say loud and clear, is that need for us to come back to that human-centeredness in everything that we do, because it's transdisciplinary, it cuts across education, human rights, democracy, and it's let's just go back to that one fundamental thing that connects us to one another, and that is that human-centeredness. And as you say, it's about building back hope. And how do we start? Not by us hiding behind our positions or our institutions, but how we can stand tall, and each and every one of us can actively start engaging in that process. Thank you so much. And I'm going to invite some questions. Please do challenge us, do ask for clarifications. We, together with the panelists, Sophia, Shark, and Christina, very happy to take some of your questions.
Do we have any questions in the chat? Maybe you should look at the chat as well. Please.
Meramongulu, please go ahead.
Oh, thank you very much. What a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful summit. I am Meramongulu from the Republic of South Africa. I'm an academic and a member of Public Relations Institute of South Africa. Beautiful. I have a question on from the previous presenters. And the question is, how has social media impacted on PR? And I have in mind, how has social media impacted on PR, especially as regards freedom of expression? I'm saying this because I know that freedom of expression or freedom of speech is synonymous with media and the press. Thank you. That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question, sister of the African soil and from South Africa. Just because of the time, I'm going to ask Christina to please respond.
Well, let's say that 6 years ago, I would have said that it had fundamentally changed everything because of transparency and because it gave us so much voice. A lot of us are so much older that we remember the time before we had our voices, and we used to talk about social media as a tool for democracy. But because everything good can also be used in a very bad way and wrongly, and therefore we are now in a very, very serious situation with misinformation and disinformation. I'm actually working on behalf of ICO as an ICO representative with the Council of Europe on a high group where we talk about, we are working on legislation where we can see where the artificial intelligence is what that is doing for human rights. And definitely when all these tools that we have and social media tools, they create bubbles, echo chambers that are not good for us. So yes, it has given, there's a sort of a new power in the field that if we don't embrace that and use that same power for our messages, and we work on the algorithms as well, we will probably lose the game. So for us, I think you made a good point there earlier that we need to be very tech literate as well, and make sure that we sort of understand that how PR is conducted is also through these channels.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think computers still have a lot to learn. Can I add one sentence, Jan Hans?
No.
There's a very simple phrase. You teach computers something, and it's about, well, for example, Maxim, our host today, he is from Sofia. But I hope you all agree that the other way around, Sofia is not from Maxim.
We
understand.
We have friends since decades with Sofia.
Yeah, we're great friends.
But tell this to a computer and he will be very mistaken because he doesn't know the difference between the city and the person. And that's a simple example just to show that computers still have a lot to learn. So sorry for you putting me on the spotlight, Sophia.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to wrap up again to say, Sophia, Shark, and Christina, it was really an honor for the World Communication Forum Association to have you as panelists today. And I hand back to Maxim. Thank you so much.
Jan Hans, thank you very much. Jan Hans, thank you very much. Participants also for the very, very professional moderation, of course, Jan Hans, and also Christina, Jofi, Shark for the very insightful speeches and presentations. Now we are moving slightly to the end of our dear summit. Usually, if we were in Davos physically, then we would go for a drink at the lobby of the hotel, and then we would go for a gala dinner. But we will move this for next year. There were a couple of important words during the presentations from the very beginning: trust, fake news, pandemic, leadership, ethics, of course, the latest session, and now we are moving to the merge. The business is merging. One day it will be a new business, united business, with advertising, with public relations and digital. Do we have Clara Lille here from Vietnam? Clara was about to be a moderator of the session, and I don't see her, I think. She is in Canada, most probably celebrating the Lunar New Year still, which was last week, but maybe Clara is celebrating. So I will take over this session because more or less it was my idea to include the so important merge into communications business. And I would like to introduce Michael Schroeder, great professional, former Hill & Houghton, today CEO of Orca Affairs, and also ex-IPREX Global President. Justin Green, a great Irish friend and fellow, the President of Global Alliance for Public Relations and Communications Management. Peter Mutier, the former APRA, the African Public Relations Organization President, and now the CEO of Peterson Integrated Communications. And our good friend from Vietnam, who is not celebrating New Year, I hope, Mai Le, and she's the country manager of PR Newswire. Because I was mentioning Vlad Bezikalov just a couple of minutes ago, and they have a very, very, very strong representative as a speaker today. And later on, if Vlad would like to mention something at the end of the session, will be mostly welcome. Now, Jessica, my assistant, is telling me that Clara is here. Clara, are you here?
Hi, Maxim.
Hey, Clara.
Hello.
How you say in Vietnamese hello?
Xin chào.
So, xin bien, Clara, and xin bien, Mai Ahle. Clara, please take over the session.
So, thank you, Maxim. Hello and welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining me today. And my name is Clara Lille, and I am the Managing Director of Davos Communications, a PR and marketing agency in Vietnam. And our session now is on merge between PR, advertising, and digital. Does it create a new business? It is my pleasure to have 4 wonderful and seasoned professionals in the field to join with me with our panel discussion. And before I turn to them for quick introductions, I'd like to mention that if you have any questions during our discussion, like with other sessions, please type them into the chat box. And we will also have some time for Q&A at the end. Now, without further ado, we will turn over to Michael to introduce himself.
Well, hello, everyone. It's already good evening from Germany to all of you around the world. Hi, Maxim. He introduced you already us before you joined the panel, Clara. So I would add something else, because when Maxim called me some weeks ago to join this panel, I asked myself, why? And then I thought, and maybe because he knew from my past profession that I was once the CEO of an advertising company of EuroRCG, then CEO of a PR agency like Hill Norton or Ketchum, and now Sec Newgate in Germany, and now working in an agency which is maybe already a merger between advertising, PR, and digital. And I was also laughing because the theme of our panel seems to me a little bit, is it really new? Digital is new, but the question of merging PR and advertising is a topic which is more or less nearly 20 years old. It's an ongoing fight, not between advertising and PR, mainly between different mindsets regarding what is the need of communication. So I'm happy to be on this panel and looking forward to your questions, Clara.
Thank you, Michael. And I'm turning to Justin.
How you doing? I'm Justin Green. Thanks for introducing me, Clara. I'm the president of Global Alliance, which represents approximately 300,000 practitioners and academics across 126 countries around the globe. And delighted to be here. I'm a former president of the Public Relations Institute of Ireland, and I'm actually from Dublin, so I'm actually zooming in from Dublin, Ireland today. So great to be part of this great celebration of communications from everywhere, and congratulations to Max and all your team for pulling together such a wonderful conference.
Thanks, Justin. And Peter?
Jambo bwana, ambari gani, nzuri sana.
Ah, that is so
wageni, wakaribishwa Kenya yetu, hakuna matata. Oh, hey, Maxim, where's the guitar? Anyway, hello everyone, my name is Peter Muti.
Africa One. Africa One.
I thought it wise to give you some flavor of Mombasa, that we have given you that background. And it's a pleasure to join you this evening. I've been in the field of PR for more than 25 years now. I'm the former president of Africa PR Association, former president of the Public Relations Society of Kenya, and currently a board member of the Global Alliance. So it's a pleasure, and we will have a good discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. And our last panelist today is Mayan.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, very early morning from Vietnam time zone. So first of all, I would like to thank Maxim and Clara for your invitation and the connection. So Mayan Lê, country manager of PR Newswire. And I used to be a Reuters veteran in Vietnam. So I'm very keen on this topic today. The merging between PR, advertising, and digital is really an inevitable trend in the future. So hopefully that I can join the panel discussion with all of you and learn from you. Thank you.
Thank you. Wow, we have a very diverse panel today, and I'm sure our discussion will be insightful and relevant to our audience, no matter where they're from. So first of all, our topic today, traditional PR, advertising, and digital marketing, they appear to be unrelated, which is why many businesses are still separating these three, their PR team, advertising team, and digital marketing team. They have separate objectives, tasks, and budgets. However, like Michael mentioned earlier, people are seeking more than only one channel to build their brands, and consumers today, they need to interact, be involved, be part of the experience, and ultimately feel that it is their own personal experience. And integrating advertising and digital tools to PR allow brands to create this unique personal experience that consumers are seeking. And this trend leads to our first question: is merging PR, advertising, and digital an inevitable trend in the future? So, Michael, would you like to start?
Well, as I said already, I mean, it's not a new trend. We discussed it in different topics. Once we said we need to create a kind of 360-degree communication. Then we were talking about full service, but it's all the same. It was all the time the same topic, the same need to integrate communication for the benefit of our clients and also for the benefit of our consumers or target groups, whatever. In preparation for today, I read an interesting quote, which I want to add to our discussion, which comes from the actual marketing director of VW in Germany. And he said, communication departments must reinvent themselves as today's silo structures, marketing and advertising versus classical product PR and corporate communications will increasingly overlap. So interesting that this need is defined here from the client side, because they need to reinvent their communication silos and departments already, but we need, as communication professionals, we need to follow this. And so by that, I would say there's no need to be astonished for this need and for this question of merging, because it's an ongoing one.
Thank you. And how do you think, Justin?
Yeah, I'd agree with Michael. I think first and foremost is that while traditionally years ago you would have had people would have fought over the fact that they were not advertising, that they were purely PR, but as the global communications has expanded, you know, we need to reflect the needs of our clients if you're a PR agency. And within doing that, I mean, that involves, you know, the other marketing elements of digital, of advertising. And we can all see now how the demand is that if you have an agency that you must supply your client, and it's no longer acceptable for people of a PR agency to turn around and say, no, they can't do that because there's an advertising or a marketing element. But I suppose most importantly is that, you know, even if you are doing elements of advertising, PR and digital combined, the most important thing is that everything is done ethically and that you always maintain the standards that are true to you. And that's the most important thing I would say. But also, you know, with the amalgamation of buyouts of PR and communications companies around the world that we see a lot more happening today, you know, that's going to be inevitable that advertising, digital will all merge. I know certainly for myself, I combine all three, but yet I would still maintain myself principally and primary as a PR practitioner. So I think it will only increase as we go on, but I suppose more we'll see it from management companies, who the likes of KPMG, Deloitte, and all those others international management companies that are now moving into the PR and communication space. So that's another element. But certainly for the future, the only way to survive, I think, is by PR agencies adapting to the needs of their clients. And that will involve elements of advertising, elements of digital. But at all times, the most important thing is to maintain your ethics and make sure the standards are second to none and as to what we would all buy into. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Justin. And so our two colleagues from Europe think, okay, it is a must-have trend for PR and advertising digital to merge. And let's hear it from Africa. Peter, how about you?
Well, thank you very much. I would like to agree with Justin and Michael, but also say that I would be more comfortable using the word convergence more than merging, because the three disciplines are distinct. PR will remain about building relationships, sustaining mutual understanding with publics. Advertising is a selling factor, and marketing, of course, is also related to selling. So what we are seeing is convergence of the three to deliver a more seamless value to clients. And therefore, it's become necessary for PR professionals to have skills in the three areas, because if you're going to offer 360 degree service to your client, then you must have those competencies. Now, one driving factor to this convergence is, of course, technology, because every communication that we are doing now is technologically enabled. Every advertising that we are doing now is technologically enabled, same as marketing. And so as we advance in technology, we will see convergence of the three. We cannot avoid that. And for me, I think it's a better value and it's better business for us as agencies, because what was reserved for marketing, we can do. And so having skills in those three is critical. Training companies, for example, like Peterson, which I lead, we are able to adjust our curriculum to cover those areas that were not traditionally PR. So when we are training on communication and PR, we then have to include skills in digital marketing, skills in advertisement, because that is what the market is, demanding. And we know that if you don't give the market what it wants, then you are driving yourself out of that market.
Thanks, Peter. And Mayan, for this trend, do you think, what do you think are the advantages of merging these three elements in terms of for agencies and for in-house practitioners as well?
Thanks, Clara. Before answer your question, I may want to add on more point for the first item, because I see on the chat there is a comment from Sandwich said that PR is seen as inferior and less creative, and that's the reason to make sense to integrate all the method. So in terms of merging the PR, advertising, and digital marketing, I think it's a inevitable trend. But the reason to make it that's because the expectation and demands from customer is much higher than ever before. The creativity is not much enough, so it means that we have to increase all parts of three types of media, including own media, paid media, and owned media. Besides that, the evolution and diversify of technology also can help brands or any new business to monitor and measure the result properly in terms of branding, communication, or advertising. So that's the way to make sure that our campaigns will be successfully. And as your question about the advantage of integrate all three elements, for me, I think the first advantage is that it is the key to unlock any company's brand health, exposure, and revenue. By only combining all three types on tools and channel, we can bring our completed solution communication for any brands and enterprises. And by doing that, we can measure and monitor the result and make sure that it is certified, it can be certified by client. There's no gap, or maybe minimize the gap between client expectation and the outcome. And of course, by doing that, we also can save more costs and manage people more efficiently. That sums up my points.
Okay, thank you. And if everyone is saying that there is a need to merge between these three elements, do you think we can still distinguish between PR, advertising, and digital, or is everything a part of each other now? Or do you think there is still a need to distinguish, or no? Michael?
I think it's a very good question, but the question is, why are we talking about merging?
Mm-hmm.
Isn't it more about coming back to what I said about a mindset of consultancy, which means we need to be able more than in the past for the future to consult our clients to reach their goals, communication goals or marketing goals, whatever, in the best way. And the best way is a question of strategy and of the perception of the target group regarding the goal. So it's not a question of combining or merging PR, advertising, and digital. Digital is in everything meanwhile. Digital is more technical channel and not a question of advertising or PR.
We shall not apologize.
Communicate. The question is the strategy and how to consult what we need to reach the goal.
Okay, so further to your point, the question is, how do we do that? So back to our panelists, how do you think we can prepare our organizations or our agencies for this trend in terms of the process or human resource or technology updates? Peter?
Thank you. Before I respond to that, let me add something on what Michael has said. The three disciplines, in my view, still remain distinct, but they are converging. I don't think advertisement will play the key role of communicating for mutual understanding between an organization and publics. Of course, you can have adverts that are corporate oriented, that are not selling a product and therefore playing the role of PR and vice versa. But what we are seeing is an increasing linkage between the three disciplines so that the service that we are providing to our clients is seamless and it has more value. So how do we prepare ourselves? How do we prepare our clients? One is, of course, having the requisite skills in the three areas. So that when you are required probably to be an agency for a particular company and they want those three services, then you have requisite skills and you can effectively and efficiently supply the services. That's one. The other one is, of course, and this I don't need to overemphasize, is keeping abreast with technology, because the three are very highly driven by technology today. What we are doing, for example, Davos Summit, with more than 200 people congregating online, that is technology. And we are doing communication. Summits and the conferences and all those are communication functions. And so our clients, our staff, ourselves, we must be fully abreast with the technology so that then that convergence is effectively utilized. I think that is critical. And of course, then change in mindset so that we don't stick into that traditional mindset of a PR. This is how we've been doing things. This is how we do it. In Africa, we have a saying that a tree that bends is never broken by wind. And so that underscores the importance of flexibility and adapting to the new environments that are, of course, necessitated by the changing scenarios and the convergence of the disciplines. Thank you.
you. Like you mentioned, it is very important to be flexible, to be adaptive with the market's demands, and because people are more and more looking forward to a communication being carried out on multi platforms at the same time. So we PR agencies must adapt to that. But my next question would be, do you have a story to share from the client side? How would you think about the clients when they adapt these trends for in-house practitioners, for brands? How do they prepare for this trend? Not only us agencies, but also on the client side. Justin, would you have anything to add for that?
Well, I think with agencies, they've already adapted, and either internally within themselves where they're doing those functions already. I mean, the majority of communications or PR is now all digital. So we are effectively a digital organization, as Peter was saying. With regards to the alliance or alignment with advertising, which may be a bigger step, I think it's more a thing of economies and economics of scale, whereby you're attracting business to your organization. And a lot of the time now is that, you know, clients don't actually, they're looking for a 360, you know, campaign, and sometimes they don't actually look down to whether it's which element is advertising, which element is PR, which is issue management, as Peter referred to, or crisis management, or, you know, even adverts in relation to issue management adverts where PR people are engaged a lot rather than to the hard selling. And I think, you know, both on the client side and actually within companies, there needs to be a better understanding. But I think for most PR agencies, if they were to be truthful, they would actually say that we have to actually move with the economics and where the market is going. And I think unless you actually lead that way and accommodate it, well, then you'd be left behind within your own market. And obviously it's different all around the world. But I mean, in some cases, I'm not saying that PR agencies suddenly become advertising agencies, but most PR agencies, if they're small, if they're the smaller agencies, they align themselves with an advertising agency, or maybe have a separate or a sharing agreement or a help whereby they can share or pass on work to them. So it actually avoids whereby they can meet the needs of the client. They don't have to get involved in advertising, but they can reach out to a colleague or another agency who can provide that service, but come back to the client with one proposal. And I think that's being clever, and it's the business acting clever, thinking clever, and actually returning it for your business. Thank you.
Thanks, Justin. And for my end, I'm seeing a very interesting question from our audience. And because you are so rooted in the media part, working with PR Newswire and Reuters, there is a question saying, keep in mind, technology is a channel, so we all use so we would all need it. But however, our main audience is the media. So the content we prepare should have the media in mind. So most media will say it feels like advertising, will say it feels like advertising to pay. So when you are pitching or you earn the media, how would you think about this trend? Do you think media will still be a big part in this trend?
Thanks for a very interesting question. So from my own point of view, I think when merging a PR, advertising, or marketing generally, there's a reason. Because for PR, the main task for PR is telling the story. We engage, we embrace the art of telling story. So it means that the story of the content, how we deliver the content, how we can build a story, that's very important. So content is always king. The second part for marketing or advertising or any social or traditional marketing efforts, they are like, how to say, measurable analytics. They can bring out a very convincing number and index to convince the board of director to any campaigns So in my terms, the balance between the content and the way to deliver it in multi-platform is quite balanced. But the key thing is that when you want to engage your audience, I mean the mass audience, you need to build up very great content, convincing and also unique content. By doing a good content and engage with the art of storytelling, you can how to say, touch any heart and feeling of your audience. So that's very important to build the good roots for your campaigns. Besides that, by applying multiple choice of type of tools and channels, it can reach out to the larger engagement with your audience. So by that doing things, you can gain more own media for that thing.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
And one more point that because nowadays any brands or clients, there is a need that they need to diversify their own portfolio. They cannot pay attention too much on this portion, like on the campaign itself or like the advertising itself. So they need to balance the way we balance the message and the way they deliver the message can convince and touch the client and the audience heart and keep the interest, the desire, and even the loyalty from any brands and any service.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And another question from our audience. As we all see, this is a trend, it is inevitable, but the point is, how do we persuade people to adopt this trend, and how do we have people effectively using the merge between multi-platforms? So the question here we are having is that most clients are already understanding the need for a merged 360-degree communication approach, but many are not ready with the resources like budgeting capabilities that's still conventional, both to hire an integrated agency or to fund a complete team internally. How do you think we can convince the market to change the general mindset? Who in our panel would like to take this question?
It's a very interesting question. We are facing these topics day by day because we are working mainly for public institutions and ministries in Germany with our agency, and they have a big fear regarding mainly the digital part of communication because of less control and less resources, because they think if they really use social media and digital communication, they need an army of people to handle this. So we need to, it's still a process of education and to bring them on the safe side to deal with those new channels.
Anyone else want to add on to this?
Yeah, I think Michael has nailed it very well. And I've also observed some trend in Africa where the big four global consulting companies, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Deloitte, KPMG and the like, are actually getting seriously involved into providing the services that agencies are providing. So that when they are consulting for a particular client on change management or something, then they want even to provide services that were, prescribed for agencies. And there is a risk of them taking over because they've got the muscle. And so again, it's a question of efficiency, providing the services, perhaps not making super profits, trying to be as competitive as we can in our pricing so that our clients don't see heavy burden in terms of accessing our services. So we may have to tighten our profit margins Otherwise, we can very easily be overridden by the Big Four.
And just to add on to what Peter was saying is that on one hand, it's great that these companies don't have the facility to in-house to service their requirements, because that's a huge opportunity for PR agencies and for all our profession around the world. So the fact that we do have this knowledge, the fact that we can provide a 360 whole campaign is an opportunity. So therefore, I would see it more of an opportunity, the fact that in-house clients, as Michael was saying, may not, are under the belief that they need loads of people, because that in effect has them coming to agencies and outside and coming to professionals. And as long as they keep coming to the professionals, well, then that's good for our business in terms of economics.
Peter, I'm sorry, I'm not sure, because at the end, if you take big corporates or ministries or public institution, you handle partly very, very sensitive content. And as we heard, and we are really facing the problem, they are not willing to pass this content and dealing with this content in terms of communication with target groups into agency hands. So in terms of ethical and control, it's a very tricky discussion.
Justin, would you have any response to Michael, or are we good with this question?
No, I think what Michael says is correct as well, but I think there's a balance, because I mean, if you're just, there's more than just ministries. There's, hundreds of thousands of businesses. Sure. What I mean, it just depends who your client is. Obviously, the sensitivity of a nature is one thing. There's other, big companies that would actually, would see it as an opportunity, or see it as economies of scale, or using specialists would suit them better. So it all depends on the marketplace and who the client is. But other than that, no, I mean, I'd agree with Michael.
Okay, thank you, everyone. And looks like our time is running out. To my colleagues in the panel, is there anything else you would like to mention before we wrap up?
Well, I would like to emphasize the point of ethical observance in everything we do, because that is at the core of our business. Keeping to ethics, confidentiality, ensuring that client information that is not supposed to be disclosed is not disclosed. I think ethics lie at the core of what we do. So even as we talk about merger, observance of ethical practice and observance of what is ethically acceptable will be good for sustaining us in business.
Clara, thank you very much. Thank you, Michael, Justin, Peter, Mayan. Really appreciate amazing session, and this is the future of our business. So, ladies and gentlemen, we survived 100 people out of 350, which we started 360, 70. And let's listen briefly our good friend Cesare Valli to wrap up and to tell us what was the most important, although of course all of us, we made notes, all of us will watch video if you would like to see it starting most probably Monday with no edits. But Cesare, you are a great professional, known very well all over the world as a person who knows the business and who is very straight to the point. You have the floor.
Thank you, Maxim. And thank you for giving me this very easy task, I have to say, to wrap up this very interesting discussion and very high-level discussion. So I'd like to thank everyone indeed in the panels and keynote speakers, because I thought this discussion was very high-level and very interesting. And I will try to summarize in in few words, what I think is the most important message that I have taken from this various discussion. First of all, let me start with the stakeholders topic. I think we all have agreed that everyone is nowadays a stakeholder of whatever kind of communication we do. And actually, we have a global stakeholder system. And we agreed on few things, which are that there is a big need to always be very honest in what we convey to the stakeholders, very truthful, visionary. The word visionary was heard several times, because you know, our stakeholders all over the world are confused because, you know, few years ago they were confused because of globalization. Nowadays they are confused because this pandemic situation, and they're looking for another way we've heard to be called new normal, which no one knows what it is, but we're trying to think it is normal. Now, and we have heard that for a leader, it is fundamentally important to be visionary, to be inspiring, and to lead by example. And I cannot comment, but you know, we all of us have in mind leaders who are inspiring and able to really lead by example and being upfront of the situation, and leaders who are not. But I think we agree on the fundamental point: honesty, truthful, and ability to guide. Then if we talk about the way we teach, the way we train the people, it is another fundamental topic, because we all know that 30, 40, 50 years ago, you used to go to the school, to the university to learn, and then you change your life because you begin working and you end learning. Nowadays, there is no boundaries between learning and working. There is a total learning path throughout your living experience. And you know, it is very interesting to have heard talking about the hybrid teaching mode. Clearly, we are obliged at the moment to use technology and to teach, because we are obliged to be distant, which is a very big problem. Very big problem, because interaction is a sense of a human being. So without interacting on a personal, present basis, it is very, very difficult. But I'm sure we are overcoming a number of problems, and there are even some advantages of having had to learn how to use technology. And the advantages are clearly that with the same you know, set of information and training activity, we can involve a much larger number of people, which will open up the opportunity for a lot of people to learn and to be trained. And more importantly, this remove the healthy barrier. So, I mean, the training opportunity will not only be for wealthy people who can spend a lot of money to be in the best university of the world, because the best university of the world can reach, you know, whomever, wherever. So there are advantages and disadvantages, I personally hope that we will overcome the problem of the pandemic, of course, and we will have the opportunity to have even personal meeting in person. But nevertheless, I mean, I'm sure we will keep them the advantages of this new formula we have learned to use. Now, going to the ethics, I mean, there is a fundamental agreement on how important is the ethics. And, you know, I would say that it is fundamentally important not to break the toy, because if we will not be sincere, truthful, and respectful of everyone human being, we will destroy the toy. We will destroy the media. We will destroy the channels to communicate with people. We have seen from Edelman Barometer how skeptical are most of the people with the media credibility at the moment. That is a very important topic for me, because if you want to maintain the opportunity to communicate with people, we have not to break the toy. So we have to respect the fact that we have to be truthful. And frankly, I believe this is the best interest for our clients, because as a way of saying is, lies have very short legs. I believe that a lie will be discovered sooner or later. And it may seem a shortcut, but it is not. It's just a probable disaster. And of course, we have discussed even about human rights and human rights crisis. And, Christina spoke about a very flammable word. And I'm totally in agreement. And Sophie talked about the frustration. So these are very dangerous elements which we have to take care of and to be even more ethical because of that. Then talking about the convergence or the merging about the various disciplines, as Michael said, I've been surfing from advertising to many, to all the disciplines actually of this communication world. And for me, this at the end of the day is something that has to do with the holistic view of communication. Michael said that we have to become a better consultant for our clients, and I fully agree. We have, consulting means even to advise client on what is the best channel and the best tool for communicating the same message, actually, because a message can be used in various disciplines, in various ways. But at the end of the day, consistency of the message is a fundamental thing, and it has all to do with reputation. Now, having said all of that, I would like to say that in this very difficult moment with this pandemic situation, we have a fantastic opportunity, because one thing that impressed me the most in this discussion is that actually the fact that in our world, I see a common culture. I mean, we are all sharing the same problems and the same feelings. And frankly, I think that, again, as a world, we will get out from this very situation all together. And I think Solly mentioned a word, a sentence, and he spoke about social justice. I believe this is a fundamental step in the world at the moment, and I hope we will be able, as the entire world, to find a way to provide vaccine for everyone in this world. Now, let me finish commenting what Maxim said, because he said that normally in Davos, we would have gone to a pub to have a glass of wine, but actually I have here a glass of wine, which I raised to toast Maxim and to thank him for this fantastic forum he has been able to put together. Thanks, Maxim.
Grazie mille, amigo. Grazie mille. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very, very much. I just want to update you. We are going, the World Communications Forum Association. First of all, I thank very, very much to the Global Executive Board. Ganesh Chandrasekaram from India, Jon Hans Koetzer from Portugal, Sori Moeng from South Africa, Nurul Ashinian Shamsuri, known as Maria, from Malaysia, Clara Lille from Vietnam, Mina Nazari from Iran, Jacqueline Streyer from United States, Saurabh Ubovea from India, Cesare Valli from Italy. Look what a cocktail, what a chemistry of different experience, cultures, friends. And I emphasize on the word friends, because when 12 years ago, Yanina Dubeykovskaya came to my office and said, Maxim, we go to Davos, are you coming with us? And I said, who are you? And she said, me and my husband, Alex. And I said, what do we do now? And she said, we will gather professionals, number one. We will make friends, number two. So I see today that it works, because a lot of people between us, we don't know each other. Of course, some of the so-called Davos veterans, we know each other well. But some of us, we meet first time. And it's a new creation of a professional and even personal friendship. Let me tell you, starting on Monday, Davos, or World Communications Forum Association, is announcing Davos Communications Awards. We have already jury, very high-level jury. We have already the categories. We have already a logo. We have already a website even. So this is our next project. The next project will be a global educational program on public relations, and I hope that all of you will join us as a presenters, as speakers. And last but not least, thank you very much for PR Newswire. I see Vlad Bazikalov here. Again, if you want your business, your opinion to be heard, to be published, to be understood, then use PR Newswire by Kijun. Thank you very much also for the global online newsletter, Public Relations Today. And if you come to Sofia, you must stop to Lonchi Space, the one we were transmitting from, the best place in this city. And thank you very much. Thank you, the technical team. Thank you, Stefan. Thank you, Ralica. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you very much for the global, for all those global team, and also for the Lonchi Space. Again, it is time to say goodbye. Nямам тук екрана обаче. Thank you very, very much, everyone. Let's keep our friendship, let's keep our professional contacts, and hope to see you very soon again. Maybe in Davos, maybe again online, no matter. Thank you and have a good evening.